the Diamond Head Resort as a token of appreciation for allowing us to use this.
Nice.
So those are new.
Very nice. Thank you.
Nice.
All right, that brings us to the approval of final agenda. I've got one change here. We have a resolution 23-108 will be added to consent agenda G, the Bayside Park lighting. So that will be on the public record. Are there any other changes or amendments to the final agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to pull D, E, H, I, and J from the consent agenda.
D, E, H, I, and J.
And is this change you're making to G, is that something we should be discussing?
It's, Madam Clerk, you want to?
It's just a resolution that was added after the fact to just memorialize the decision that's going to be made.
Okay.
Nothing changes, it's just a resolution. Everything that's in the packet is on this.
Correct.
Any other changes?
Move approval.
Got
Second.
a motion? Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Next, we have public comment. Madam Clerk, is there anyone that is here
I
to
have
speak?
nobody signed up.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on any of the items today? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Local achievements and recognitions. We'll start with you, Councilor Veach.
Yeah, the first is the crew that was out there cleaning up the Adelia debris. That was big and stinky, still a little bit, but they did a good job and didn't haul off what looked like a bunch of sand, which was pretty comforting after Ian. And the second, I would just say, something I probably thought I'd never say is I'm actually happy that there's an increase in traffic because a lot of the traffic is construction traffic, and that's traffic that's rebuilding the island. So I'm actually happy to see all those guys out there.
Thank you. Councilor Woodson?
So just a couple of things. I was excited that the farmers market opened and was there for the second week in a row. It was fantastic. And it's just so good to have all that activity up at Times Square again. I hear the 5K went off without a hitch, and they, again, gained a ton of money for the town and for the community. So, as always, thank you for all of that. I will comment on Silas Schmucker's throwing arm for the dunk tank. This little 5-year-old got me twice, and he was very, very proud of that. And it was so cute. It was really cute, I have to say. I made him move back the second time, thinking he wouldn't get it because we had him up at the kids' line, and he moved back and he still got me. So, and I just want to acknowledge today, September 11th, it is 22 years since we had this horrible event. It changed many, many lives. It changed our life being military as well. But we have survived and we have all moved forward, but it's something we will never forget.
Very nicely stated. Anything else?
No.
Vice Mayor Adderhall?
Amen. Councilor Woodson, on the 9/11 remembrance, I did notice this morning there was a ceremony on Fort Myers Beach at the Linnell Fire Station. The chief put a wreath in front of a memorial there at the Linnell Station. If you've not been by there, it's right behind the CVS. They've got a beautiful memorial there with a section of the steel from the Twin Towers, and it's very powerful. So encourage folks to stop by today and remember the innocent victims that were lost on that day and first responders. I'd like to mention again, Karen mentioned the Beach Talk Day Before Labor Day run. It was really a unique situation in that I had a bad ankle, so I was walking, and I was walking with a gentleman.
Sure.
And I had the gentleman I was walking with. It was a 78-year-old combat Vietnam veteran. His name was Steve Lynch. He was probably about 6'5", 250, big guy, and he was having a real tough time because it was hot, and he took a pretty serious fall in the middle of the run, and then there was another gentleman from Current Coastal Realty, a guy named Glenn Huggins, who helped me get him up. He was refusing help, but he needed help, and then So I tried to reach the mayor, and then I think the mayor got a hold of the paramedics who were on their way out. And again, much to the chagrin of Mr. Lynch, who didn't want any help. Then we kept walking again. We were going to stay by him, and then he fell again, and he insisted on getting up. The paramedics finally arrived, and he just and the paramedics were much more aggressive and encouraging him to get on a gurney and stop. And he said, "No, I'm finishing." And he literally walked to the end. The paramedics on each end holding him up. And and he was talking about his veterans experience, his experience in Vietnam on the way, and just a powerful hero on our beach. And just wanted to recognize him. He actually placed in the run, but he couldn't get upstairs, so Kim Ryan came down and presented him with a medal, well deserved, and just a great inspiration. I would say too, another thing that happened on Saturday, this past Saturday, that's an encouragement to me and maybe to others as we're all still wrestling with this recovery. There was a church service by the Faith Center at the Mound House on Saturday at 4:30, and Pastor John Antonucci, who's done some work on the island, he and his wife have been ministering through the Faith Center on our island, and they're not trying to make life difficult or compete with other churches. They're having a special Saturday service every Saturday at 4:30 at the Mound House to sort of supplement and encourage what's happening here on the island with respect to our churches. And I thought it was kind of funny. They had rented the Mound House from 4:30 to 5:30, which is quite a nice limit for most pastors. And he said, as a result of that, he was going to give his miniskirt sermon. And that's a sermon where it's short enough to get your attention, but long enough to cover the important material. I thought that was a great way to describe his sermon. So it was a nice service, but anybody who's looking for some encouragement, again, every Saturday at 4:30 at the Mound House, a nice use of our facility there, and a blessing to many who attended. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor King?
I'll just reiterate what others have said. For those of us that are a certain age, there are two significant events in my life that I can remember where I was specifically on the day, and one of them was President Kennedy's assassination. Even as a 5-year-old, I have vivid memories of that. And then September 11th of 2001, a very solemn day and a sad day. I wanted to thank and show appreciation for my colleagues up here that gave of themselves in more ways than one for that dunk tank. Councilor Woodson, Vice Mayor Adderholt, and Mayor Allers did a great job of organizing everybody up there to throw, and then got talked into being a participant later on. Also, Mayor, thank you and your wife Megan for what you did to help Jason and Jacinta from Margaritas hauling much-needed supplies up north to the Big Bend area after Hurricane Idalia. And thanks to town staff, a very hard-working town staff, for all they did for us here for the Hurricane Idalia.
Thank you. Just a couple things just to reiterate. I want to thank ICS for all their hard work of getting that, whatever that sludge was that we all smelt for a few days, safely off the island as fast as possible. It wasn't ideal to have it at Newton Park, but we tried to get it out of there as fast as we could, and I think they worked very hard in less than pleasant circumstances to remove that as fast as they could. Also want to thank Rude Shrimp for their organization of the dunk tank. As you said, I was coerced. They told me there was a weight limit, so I thought I was getting out of it. But evidently we had to give it a try. So
And you raised an extra $500.
yeah, actually I think it was almost 7. They were so
there you go.
We said if you can get $500 in donations, that I would get up there and at least give the weight limit a try. And it didn't really matter because I think I spent more time in the water than I did anything. So thank you, Silas, for figuring out how to sneak behind there and pull the lever without anybody knowing. So, but it was worth it. I certainly paid for it the next day. Climbing in and out of that tank is, I think Vice Mayor Adderholt and Councilor Woodson can testify, is not an easy task, especially for those of us svelte people up here.
But I had clean water. I went first.
Yeah. I learned after about the 15th time, don't forget to close your mouth. And lastly, I want to thank not only Frankie and Andy for riding around and putting up with me all night during Idalia when it was coming through and doing what we could do to make sure we kept the eyes on the island, but also the staff. They came out in force the next morning. And if you could have saw the amount of sand and debris and stuff that they cleaned up so fast before anybody even really got a chance to see it, they went above and beyond. So thank you too, and thank you staff for all your hard work. And that is it. Next we have advisory council items, reports, and appointments. Do we have anyone from a committee that would like to? Nothing? All right, we'll close that. Approval of minutes, town council meeting August 21st, 2023, and the town council special meeting August 29th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
A motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended to pull item D, E, H, I, and J?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Counselor Veach, you want to start with the item D?
The comprehensive emergency management plan. This I understand that this is kind of a boilerplate plan where you fill in the blanks. It seems like from the state, but I think it's an important time for us to kind of talk about some of the things that could be done better after a storm that we witnessed from Ian. I just came up with three ideas. One is that after the storm, I ran into or heard a lot of stories about people who are staying at hotels or vacation rentals who seem to be not informed about the risks, not given any options about where to go, and not given any tools to get to shelters, this kind of thing. So I wonder if we can look at setting up some kind of mechanism where we can have the hoteliers and the property managers come up with a way where we notify them and they notify the guests of the risk and the options. Because there's a couple. I know there was at least one hotel guest who died in the storm, and there was, and I ran into a guy from Germany who couldn't get into his vacation rental, and he was trying to catch his plane, and he didn't seem to know anything about the storm or the risks. So I think that there's a lot of effort in trying to educate us residents about the storm, but I think that I just like to work with the private industry to come up with a mechanism to notify guests of the risks and the options that are available to them, and make that maybe that's something we can make as part of our emergency management plan.
I think that makes sense. I know maybe that's something, I know we've talked about the condos, the boards, that you could have a messaging center up there if it's something the hotels could put out.
Property management.
And property managements that could put out and say, this is a potential just to be aware. Do you want to work with staff to,
I will do that, yeah.
is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, another thing that now I talked to the emergency management guy, they had Bill something, I forget his last name. And I asked him specifically, I said, a lot of people are very concerned that the rescue people are going to be breaking down the doors and leaving their places open to looters. And he said he'll get back to me. He got back to me and said they would only break down doors if there was a sight, a smell, or a sound of some need to get into it. I don't believe that was the case. I think there was a lot of places that were broken down. And I understand that their priority is to look for people and save lives. But I'm also concerned that knowing that the doors will be broken down will discourage people from leaving in the event of a storm. Because if they think that their doors are going to be broken down, their place is going to be left open, they're less likely to leave, they're more likely to put themselves at risk. Now, I know, Mayor, that you've worked with the fire department in coming up with a plan. I think I'd like to have that as part of the conversation.
No, I certainly, I heard the exact same thing that you said, but I've also heard from residents that felt that was not necessarily true. And none of us were there when they were walking down every street with the dog. So it's hard for me to speak on whether or not they see or smelt or felt something that made them enter these houses. But I don't know what we can do. It wasn't just the fire district. There's a lot of USAR teams here from all over the state that were here to help. And I don't know that there's a way. Certainly, we can have discussions on how we can do it better than it was, because I'm concerned, as well as you are, that there were doors being kicked down that maybe shouldn't have been. But without being there with them side by side, it's very difficult to determine or make an assessment or judgment on their judgment to whether they enter a house or not. So
I would even think, because I know that, they've got their job to do, that if we could, come with volunteers who would follow groups around with a drill driver and some screws, and screw doors shut after they're done, maybe that would help them out too. I don't want to necessarily be just saying you can't do your job. I would, come up with ways that we can help them in an emergency do their job, or even maybe just supply them with equipment. Supply teams have a set of drills and screws that they could have, so just a few seconds to seal the door up when they're done.
maybe that's something, Andy, you guys could work up a plan to, even if we had to get some temporary help in, if we have to go through this unfortunately ever again, that someone, because I think that's a good idea. If you could have someone that could follow behind them, that is allowed to be on the island at that time if they're doing that search. Whether they're trained or not trained to help, I think is important to look into. But if they have to breach a house for some reason, that there's a way that they can, I don't know, maybe Becky, you'll have to work with Becky too, because I'm guessing there's probably some legal wording in there that would prevent someone from being able to just go in if they're not an emergency response person.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work on that.
Okay.
And one more thing, and this again, this thing was a disappointing observation, was there seems to be what I would call disaster followers. Is that after the storm, we had people who were coming in, staying in abandoned houses, let's call it living off of land. Maybe, probably looting would be a better word, because I know that places where they were out acquiring a lot of bicycles and kayaks and things and putting them in trailers and working on them. So I don't know if there's what we can do after a storm to try to discourage people from squatting in units any more than we're already doing. And I know, for example, like after the storm, it was not we really work hard to provide services to the people that are on the island, that are stuck on the island, that don't have a lot of choices. And then you get people coming in from somewhere else who were doing harm, who were taking advantage of those same services, and those are enabling them to do, not good deeds.
Yeah, and I was witness to a lot of those not very good deeds, but despite what you might think, I'm not as fast as I once was. So I can't always catch everyone, but it was, I struggle with that same thing, because it was very difficult to, people wanted to get back to the properties and secure their properties, but we also wanted to try to keep them from getting on the island, because you don't know who's, and that's where I think we had a lot of that breakdown of who's supposed to be here, who's not supposed to be here. Staff knows that that's a very important thing for us going forward, that we can't have that happen again. Hopefully that can help address it, but short of just shutting down the island completely and allowing Lee County Sheriff's Office to do their job and patrol the island with no one here, it's going to be difficult, but I think we can do a much better job than it was done after the last storm.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole thing about I've been asked a number of times of like how many people stayed on the island during the storm, and I don't know, and I don't know any if I don't think the fire department knew. There's really no way to track that, and I don't know, maybe you can come up with like a lanyard that goes along with the reentry permit or something, so people come on legitimately have some kind of visible presence.
Well, we've had that discussion with the fire district and Lee County Sheriff's Office as to what is a plan, or what can we do if you choose to stay for whatever reason. They're still working on, I believe, how you can create a system where, say I decide to stay. I alert the officials, this is where I'm going to be, this is the address, here's how many people are with me, so that they know to specifically go to that spot. And I know there's some technology out there that we're looking at trying to work with the fire department on. If for some reason they have to move, their house gets shifted like it did, or they have to evacuate to get somewhere else, that you could find them, kind of like an EPIRB, but a much smaller device that's easier to follow. But knowing where someone is before the storm is, I think, a very helpful preventative tool to be able to expedite those that they can help quicker.
Yeah, and I understand, you want to be able to know where people are, but you also don't want to be looking like you're encouraging people to stay because you've got an EPIRB.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line. You can't force
Yeah,
anyone to
it is.
leave, but
I'm glad you're having the conversations already. But I just thought this is an example now that we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary. It seems like a good time to be able to talk about things that we know we could do better.
Can I add one thing, Councilor Veach? This is a very sensitive issue, but I'm curious, since the mayor and the town manager have been involved in sort of reviewing best practices, do we have a sense, the island was closed for a significant period of time under the premise of public safety, and certainly rescuing those folks who were still living was critical. And then it seemed as if there was a time where we were making sure that those who didn't survive were properly found and they managed that situation in an appropriate and respectful way. Was any of that discussed in terms of, I mean, we kept people off the island for that entire period. In other words, could we have let people on the island after the risk or after the opportunity to rescue those who were living? If we accomplished that goal, it seemed like there was an additional time spent to rescue those who weren't living, which was, again, appropriate. But at the same time, we kept people off the island. Did that ever come up in any of your discussions? And how did that break down, and what are your thoughts on that?
You want to take it, Andrew, or you want me to take it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we had that conversation with the fire chief and with Lee County Sheriff's Office about, what could we have done better? And I think there was really I think the magnitude of the storm really set people off and didn't know exactly what to do. There wasn't a very good what next kind of plan. Obviously getting people in to rescue those that need help right away is the most important. What does that time frame look like? It's hard. According to the chief, it's very difficult to put a specific time frame on whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours. Anybody that saw that disaster or saw that debris afterwards realized that they couldn't get past 7-Eleven. They needed time to get down to you where you were at in the south end. It took 4 days to get there. And it seemed to take much longer because there were so many people already on the island. So we have to do a better job of giving them that first initial 24 hours to assess the situation. Are there down power lines? Or what is a safety hazard? Before you let people, we want to get people on the island obviously as fast as they can, but we have to work on, and that's the process I think that they're finalizing or have finalized, is you go here to get your pass so that the Lee County Sheriff's Office knows exactly who you are before you come on the island. And people are going to get on the island that want to do bad things. How do you got to get Lee County Sheriffs on the island first so that they can patrol the streets, and then they know what they're looking for. So it's just, essentially, it's communication. They know what our process is, we know what their process is, and we know how much time they need based on the severity of the storm. And that could change from, had we known what we were going to get hit with, I think that the fire department would have said, for 4 days, you're not getting on this island, which would have been appropriate so that they could have did what they had to do to make sure that they could get down Estero Boulevard. So, and then Adelia was next to nothing, so it was very quick. He was parked at the base of the bridge. We had constant communication with him all night. They were running up and down the island, making sure that it was going to be safe for fire and rescue to be able to get down the road. Because if they can't safely get to you, you shouldn't be on the island. So yes, I guess the long-winded answer to your question is yes. I think that we've got a fairly good plan. Hopefully we don't have to use it, and we'll continue to tweak it. But it really comes down to communication. They need to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, who can be on the island, who can't, how do you identify them, and then they tell us when it's safe to come back on the island. I think that's the best, unless you guys have a better idea.
It's not a better idea. I'm just trying to understand. There's just a nuance, because I remember the fire chief at the time talking about the importance of finding those who had passed and making sure they were found and documented in a way that was respectful and appropriate, and I appreciated that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I wonder if the island can be opened during that phase, because it seemed like we were closed for an extra period of time after the opportunity to rescue those who were living. And obviously, we wanted to get people back on the island as soon as possible. I just was curious if with the public safety people, I don't think that was a town decision, if that nuance came up, because we do reach a point where, for those who are living, we've got to get those folks back on the island and have them kind of regain their lives or rebuild their lives. But also, I think to Councilor Veach's point, if you don't feel like you're going to be able to get back on the island in a reasonable period of time, you're more likely to stay for the hurricane. So it's a real challenging nuance, but just something I think we should continue to talk about and ruminate on.
Yeah, we had a hurricane passes that policy wasn't implemented.
Yeah,
so who's supposed to be here? Who's not supposed to be here? Unfortunately, they didn't know.
Yeah.
So it was either you close it completely, or Lee County Sheriff's they're going to check IDs at the base of the bridge. That should be our job, to know who should be coming on, who's a resident, who's a business owner, who's not, and that part of the puzzle wasn't there. So it made things very difficult for the first responders, for our staff, for Lee County Sheriff's Office. It was frustrating, as we all know.
Yeah.
we can't let that happen again. As long as Lee County Sheriffs and the first responders, I think, know who are supposed to be here and they get that first initial look at the island, I don't think there's any reason you can't let the people back on the island as soon as possible, but they have to know that they're supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
and
keep in mind that a lot of people who stayed on the island, there's quite a few. Or the other
there
thing
was.
is we're a long, skinny island, right? You can get to our island by boat very easily, no matter how many roadblocks you put up. It's pretty difficult to keep the whole back bay patrolled. So to me, that kind of points towards more letting locals on sooner, as long as they're not really interfering with the search, because you're not going to clear the island. They're not going to. That's never going to happen.
No, I think we say it all the time, control what you can control. And there's certain things that we can't, but there's certain things that we can.
But I would say, to your credit, Mr. Mayor, I think, and wish this is really more of an M&P conversation, but I think the relationships that you and the town manager, our new town manager, are building with the county, with the sheriff, with the fire department, I think those relationships were not as good as they could have been when the hurricane hit. And I commend you, Mr. Mayor, for helping to rebuild those relationships and enhance those relationships, because I think we've all learned that communication with the county, the sheriff, state, our legislative delegation is paramount to our recovery. So I think we're off to a good start on that front.
And Mayor, if I may, the one good thing that Adalia gave us was a chance to have a practice run with our staff. We were prepared for reentry, prepared for what we needed to do, and I think there was a lot of reaction to Ian. Not so much preparation. I wasn't here, but just from hearing the conversations, and now we're doing it. We're focusing a little differently. We're playing the what ifs. We're working with the county, the Lee County, the sheriff's office, and with the fire department. I'm new in place. The Lee County administrator's new in place, and so there's some different relationships that we're forging, and we're trying to build and try to anticipate as much as we can, and so to be as efficient as we can be, and empowering my staff to do some things differently. And I'll talk more about some reorganization, the things that we're trying to do to make sure that we're more prepared to react when the event comes. No matter what, we were prepared, I feel like, for worse than what we got the other night. And fortunately, it wasn't that bad, but our staff was prepared. We had everybody focused to go a certain place that next morning, and then we stopped them and said, come on in, it's not as bad as we anticipated. So we are doing that behind the scenes. It's just not a lot of things that people will see until we actually get to that point.
And I think, just to expound on that, I think people noticed how quickly the county was down here cleaning up Estero Boulevard. I mean, they were down here the next day with their sweet sweepers and their vacuums, and that goes to the town manager working with, Mr. Harner up there and his staff to make sure that although we're two people that own two different pieces of property on the island, you got to work in the same motion to achieve. And I think as you said, Andy, it was if anything good came out of that, it was a good practice run.
So then, just back to the original item, Andy. So what is does this emergency management plan have to be kind of ratified and sent to the state or something for approval, or is it just our internal
No,
document?
these typically go to the county. That's why we involve the county in this. And every city I've been in, we've usually do this in May or even before. You just dust it off and lessons learned and best practices, and you revamp it and try to bring in. And we've updated it. And you're right, boilerplate. Yeah, they're all pretty much the same, but it's a necessary evil. It's a roadmap. It's the handbook on how to respond to not just hurricanes, but any emergency.
Now, are there any other things that I mentioned or others mentioned that should go in this emergency management plan? Should we open this up for a modification, or you want to approve it as it is and then change it later, or what's the best course?
I think if we could approve it as it is, and then just let us continue to work on it, and then bring it back at a later date. It takes some time to get some of this, and and knock on wood, we're getting to the end of the hurricane season. Hopefully sooner rather than later. A little over 2 months, but we just have. We should have already gotten it approved, but now that we're at this point, if we can, and then we'll bring it back with revisions and updates.
Okay, with that from Andy, I'll move to approve the comprehensive emergency management plan.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously. Councilor Veach, item E.
Okay, now this one is, I want to just kind of clarify some things because this is what we're asking for from the TDC. Now, the TDC money is a little bit more immediate than a lot of the other monies that are coming in. And it's my understanding, reading through the document, that now we're asking for the temporary restrooms to be put in Palm. We're asking to repair a lot of the boardwalks and things, the beach accesses, and get them back to ADA compliance. And then in Newton Park, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Andy, we're asking for shade structures and a portable restroom in Newton Park?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. So, the restroom would be temporary. I think that as we know, when you're in a V zone, you can't just put back restrooms at ground level, which is, I'm sure, what everybody would like, unless they're temporary like this. So hopefully this will get that part of the beach once we're not taking seaweed up there back in. So that was more just for information, that I just want to let everybody know that the TDC money we're applying for is for the things that some people are asking for.
Yeah, and I think an important, obviously, the TDC funding is going to be greatly impacted from the hurricanes in Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach. Don't have a lot amount of money going into that, so next year it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get some of this funding.
All right. With that, I'll move to approve the 23-24 TDC grant agreements.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, that carries unanimously. Consent agenda H.
Well, I can combine H, I, and J all together because I was reading through this and thinking there was a lot of stuff going on to commemorate the first anniversary of Ian. And if anyone is listening and isn't aware of it, we've got, maybe Jenny can put out something, Jenny Dexter, just announcing all the different things that are going on between the songwriter and the different ceremonies that are going on. Because it's going to be quite a celebration.
Yeah, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, the songwriter starts on the 29th, right? So then the 28th would be the 9 to 10 event that the town is doing in correlation with Beach Talk Radio. And then I think from 11 o'clock on is the Revive. So it is a lot going on, but all for the right reasons, I believe.
And there was one thing, and I think that one of the special events wanted to have live amplified music until 10 o'clock. But now I've talked to Andy about that. Even with permission to have live amplified music, they're still subject to the noise ordinance.
Unless that's waived.
I think that was the Revive group, wasn't it?
Yes.
The 11 a.m. to 10 p.m.
And I think if it was in the songwriters as well.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I'll move to approve H, I, and J, the special event, 3 special events.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify. Do I have to do, Becky, now one at a time, or can I do all 3?
You can do all 3.
Okay. Got a motion to approve H, I, and J and a second. No other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Those carry unanimously. That brings us on to our public hearings. Do we want to do, Becky?
This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, approving with conditions, denying variance 2023-0088, variance of 6 feet from the required 25-foot setback, and a variance of 7 feet 6 inches from the required 20-foot rear setback for the property located at 125 Strandview Avenue, and providing for an effective date.
Do we have to read any of this? Or should we? Okay, I will start. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing for review of various land use requests for the benefit of the public. Please be aware that these items are quasi-judicial in nature. Our attorney will further explain.
All right. Zoning revisions, special exceptions, and variances are all quasi-judicial in nature, which requires a public hearing to comply with procedural requirements established in Florida law and in our Land Development Code. Quasi-judicial proceedings are less formal than proceedings before a circuit court, but are more formal than the remainder of our meeting and follow basic standards of due process requiring certain notices, application of the correct standards, and decisions made on competent and substantial evidence presented to the Town Council in written documents or oral testimony. The Town Council will evaluate the testimony and information for each item and draw a conclusion regarding whether the criteria in the Land Development Code or state law, as may be applicable, has been satisfied. Pure speculation or mere opinion not based on competent facts cannot be legally considered by the Town Council in evaluating an agenda item. Testimony by professionals who are qualified as experts in a particular area is considered competent evidence by the Florida courts, as well as testimony by neighbors and residents who have fact-based information such as minutes, surveys, engineering reports, etc., or testimony based on personal information. If you intend to speak, please keep this in mind. When you come forward, please state your name clearly for the record, whether or not you've been sworn in, and your qualifications or interest in this matter. For purposes of efficiency, before beginning this public hearing, I need to dispose of a few matters. Town Clerk, were all agenda items properly advertised pursuant to our Land Development Code if this was needed? Okay. At any time, if any council member has a conflict of interest that would prohibit them from voting on any item, please disclose this for the record. Any conflict?
None for me?
No.
None.
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 Okay. At this time, if there's anyone present, including the applicant, property owner, staff, who intends to provide testimony, please stand, raise your right hand, and be sworn in by the town clerk. Okay, y'all are sworn. Mayor?
All right. This item is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, approving with conditions, denying variance VAR 202-30088, variance of 6 feet from the required 25-foot street setback, and a variance of 7 feet 6 inches from the required 20-foot rear setback for the property located at 125 Strandview Avenue, and providing for an effective date. If any town council member has had any ex parte communication to disclose, please let us know the subject discussed and the identity of the person, group, or entity with whom the communication took place, any correspondence that you received, or observations made of the site. Councilor King?
None.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
None.
Mayor Allers just had a drive-by. Councilor Woodson?
None.
Councilor Veach?
I was down there talking to residents immediately after the storm. I'm familiar with the area.
Okay. Will the staff please proceed with presentation on this item? Thank you, sir.
Good morning, councilors, staff members. My name is Jason Smalley. I'm with Community Development, the Planning and Zoning Division. I'm here today to present the variance application request. As was mentioned before, there are 2 requests involved in this. There is a rear setback request that is being asked for, and that is they're asking for 7.5 feet. They will be providing approximately 12.83 feet of setback. There's a front setback to what is the street setback area, and that is a 6-foot variance request. They will be providing 19 feet of setback rather than the required 25. This lot was, for the most part, completely destroyed. The homeowner was completely destroyed after the storm. The applicants are coming back to attempt to build a single-family home. They came forward to request a variance just based on the layout of the home that they had provided. It is generally rectangular in shape. And because of their lot is obviously triangular, so their buildable area is triangular. and they and their designers had made a point that it was difficult to try and design within that area, and thus they had requested the setbacks. Staff had advised of other options that are available to them, including utilizing the cottage code for this lot, since it is technically not non-conforming lot, although it is originally platted in the dimensions that you see today. They had some reasoning for not using that cottage code lot, so instead they have come forward for 2 full variances. Staff is here to answer any questions that you may have about our process, and then the applicants are here as well.
Could you just go over just for people that may not know, the cottage code?
Of course. I apologize for not going into more detail. So the cottage code lots were recently passed in the previous few months by town council. This allowed lots generally on the beach side, which were smaller than the minimum lot size that is necessary to build a single family home. This allowed them to come back and develop a single-family home of the same size as existed pre-storm. It limits the redevelopment of that lot in as much as the lower levels are expected to be kept open. The upper area is limited to 1 living level, and then obviously it would have to meet all the rest of flood codes and local land development code. But it did allow them in that process to apply for reduced setbacks to a minimum of 5 feet. Again, because of the limitations of trying to redevelop on non-conforming lots. And when I mean non-conforming, these lots are 4,000 square feet, which is very minimal to meet full setbacks.
Do we know what the setback was, the front setback on the house that was there originally? Because it wasn't obviously in compliance with the code today. Do we know what that was?
So I have a original survey, but I don't believe that it actually gives the measurements. The house itself was, yes, much less than the 25 that would have been allowed today, and then take into account that there is also a stormwater area between them and the condominium directly to their southeast. And so the original setback was less than 25, but I do not know the exact number at this time, pre-storm.
So the stormwater area you're talking about, I noticed that the right-of-way in front of their house is pretty much was before the storm only by them, right? It went through to another house, but it looked like it was only used to them. The stormwater area, was that in that right-of-way?
So the stormwater area does constitute the right-of-way. There's a 20-foot right-of-way that was originally platted. It appears it was originally platted with the intention of being a road, but it's been utilized by the town as a grassy stormwater area to allow for percolation. And then there was a grate there as well for water to exfiltrate out of that area. So in reality, they had probably somewhere in the range of about 30 to 40 feet of setback to the wall of the condominium that is southeast of them, but 20 feet of that was the town's right-of-way for stormwater.
Jason, I'm trying to remember the LPA's vote on this. Do you remember what the vote was at the LPA?
The vote was 4-0 in recommendation to recommend approval for this.
Thank you.
And the staff's recommendation is denial because?
Simply because of the nature of the lot being triangular does not mean that they could not build a home, but staff does accept that would include additional costs and additional engineering.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Would the applicant like to present on this item? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Good morning. My name is Brian Turnez. I'm George and Arlena Mendoza's son-in-law, and speaking on their behalf, providing testimony. First, I want to thank the members of the council for hearing this. Basically, to answer the question that was asked before, the setback of the prior existing structure was 10 feet. when it was originally built. And over the years, has that increased to 15 and then now to 25. We feel it's an unnecessary burden to attempt to build within the new setback rules, considering the triangular shape of the property. It's very particular to these sets of properties, and from what I hear, there's less than 20 triangular lots out of over 3,000 that face this. So the new design would basically request on the front side, which is what runs parallel to the condominium property line, where that 20-foot right-of-way is, a reduction of setback there, but we feel that there is plenty of space there, to provide a proper setback from the condominium. In addition, I mean, the property itself really only has a front and two sides. I know there was a rear property line kind of put in to meet the 20-foot setback rule. But additionally, we don't feel, again, it's going to impede in any of the surrounding neighbors. Also, we did get letters from the neighbors in that area. We don't have enough copies. We don't know how many members of council would be here. If you like, I could present those as well.
Yeah, if you would, that'd be
Mr.
great.
Mayor.
If you want to start down there, and you can send them this way if you want.
And sir, those are obviously letters in support. Was there anybody that opposed the variance?
No, sir.
Thank
There's
you.
nobody. Yeah.
Any questions for Brian? I should ask if you're done with your presentation, or you still have some more to talk about?
No, the last thing I just wanted to point out, obviously, again, we just feel it's an unnecessary burden to try to build in that. And also there is an existing pool that we would kind of have to try to configure and build around as well. So while the recommendation from staff, saying that it can be done, we feel would be an unnecessary burden to try to accommodate that.
Are you working with a specific builder on a design, or is it a prefabbed home? Or?
No, there's an architect that made a design of the home. And again, it's the existing home was 1,082 square feet. The new design is 1,149 square feet. It's only really an additional 67 square feet.
Is that total for all the floors? Because I think you got 2 stories, don't you?
Yeah, that's for the main floor that would affect the variances. It didn't count that top floor that wouldn't really impede any of the setback rules.
Any questions for Brian?
Thank you for including these letters of support. They're very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this matter? If so, please come forward to the podium and identify yourself, provide your address, and whether you were sworn in. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this? Seeing none, we will close public comment. Are there any additional comments, rebuttals, or closing statements from the applicant? All right. I will now close. I can't close it yet. I will now close the public hearing and request discussion or a motion from town council to approve with conditions, deny with reasons, or a continuance to a time certain. Discussion? Anyone? Oh, you want to see the rest of the letters?
Well, while
The
we're
Vice Mayor leaning in.
I'm only leaning in. We can still have
These are the
this
same.
discussion just to help move things along. I would move approval of Resolution 23-107.
Second.
And discussion, yeah, it's a very unique lot in that back corner.
And I'll tell you, I mean, one thing that's really, I'm tending to agree with this because the area in front of them right away is really not a road. I mean, before this, I think it was fenced off and used like your own property, and you were maintaining it and everything else. So I don't see that front setback, and plus there's a wall there, which I don't know if they've rebuilt that wall, but that wall caused an enormous amount of damage in the neighborhood. So if they come back for that, it's another issue. But yeah, my tendency is to agree to approve this.
Any other discussion? We got a motion and a second. A roll call vote. Counselor, who was the motion maker? Sorry, I missed. Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
Counselor King?
Aye.
Mayor Allers, aye. Counselor Woodson?
Aye.
Counselor Veach?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Although I say a triangular house would be really cool.
It would be neat, wouldn't it? Till the sheetrockers had to go in there, they wouldn't be happy.
And
Try
it'd
to
be
figure
hard to
what they do
put
with the
furniture
corner.
in it.
Yeah.
That brings us to our administrative agenda. We have nothing on that. Final public comment. Is there anyone that would like to issue public comment? Yes, sir?
Hi, I'm Cliff Gallagher. I live on Naughty Turn. And several months ago, before you wrote up and instituted the trailer motorhome ordinance that was passed in May, I came and I warned you folks that there were certain legalities that you had to meet. One of the legalities that affects me is that you've taken away from me my property right to park my motorhome on my property without jumping through a bunch of hoops. And then it looks like if the property is livable, that you're not going to allow me to park my motorhome there. I've been parking a motorhome there since the late 1980s. And now I have to stop driving my motorhome down here from New Jersey. You have to accept the registration that I have in New Jersey. You can't make me get a different registration down here because you want to run Fort Myers Beach as if it's a homeowners association. Reading over the ordinance, it appears that you're outlawing any type of motorhomes that stay for more than a certain amount of time. If I come down here for 6 months and want to park my motorhome there, I've got plenty of room on my property. I got at least a quarter of an acre. There's no problem with being able to park my vehicle there. And I said, you know, you're supposed to recognize the licensing of that vehicle from another state. That's a constitutional requirement. And you're not doing it. You're saying, well, come to the town hall and get a piece of tape to put on your car. That's ridiculous. That's an absolutely ridiculous thing. I can see if you're going to have somebody parking on their lot and living permanently in a vehicle. I can see if somebody's going to open up a food trailer to throw things out to the general public. I'm not doing that. That ordinance needs to be changed. You've got all these different types of vehicles crammed in to this part and crammed into that part. You don't separate out the types of vehicles that they are. That's one of the big problems with that ordinance. And of course, I've got other things I want to say. And standing up here trying to get all this out, I'm forgetting them. I'll address to Councilman Veach his public statements about getting federal money for instituting workers' housing on the beach. Is that something that the town is still doing? Are you going to apply for federal money to put in workers' housing? Well, you're not saying, but let me tell you what happened in Watts. They created workers' housing for people to work on the docks in that area. And
Cliff, I'm going to need you to wrap up. I'm going to need you to
yeah,
finish
well,
up.
what happened is it became a slum. And this happens every time you have subsidized housing. The people live there, don't pay the full amount. They don't fix things. Things run down. And then after a number of years, you've got a slum. People in this town do not want to live among slums. So that's what I came up here to say.
So you should think very, very carefully, except to taking federal money to build places that are going to end up run down. And the last thing, of course, is when the Red Coconut was here, you had people come in and park motorhomes there, and you have another place where they were able to pull in and park for a while. You know, people were able to buy little lot lines. You know, they were having to pay money to have these places, but they didn't have to have a home there. They could bring their motorhome there and park it. Has that all been done away with? Thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Cliff. Becky, can you add just to your, I'll ask you about it when it comes up, but specifically about his first comment that he brought up. I want you to address that. We'll bring it up under your, can you add that under your agenda items? The legal response. I just want to ask you a question about it. So
Okay, sure.
is there anyone else that'd like to speak in public comment? Yeah, come on up.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Spector. I'm an attorney with Retzel and Andrus, and I'm here on behalf of Persad Properties. I understand that the item that you have on the agenda today is under the attorney's items, but we would like to reserve the right.
Pull that mic a little closer.
I'm still, yes, sorry about that. We would like to be able to participate in that conversation since it is a settlement agreement with Mr. Persad's entity. So I don't know if it's appropriate to put our comments on the record now or if we'll have the opportunity to speak during that agenda item.
I would hope you would have the opportunity to speak during that agenda item.
Okay, if that's okay with the council.
I'm fine with it as long as we can legally do it. You tell me.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay,
fine.
perfect.
Unless there's an objection from any of my fellow council members. No?
Okay, then
Okay.
I'll see you then.
Thanks,
you.
Sarah. Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll close public comment. Oh, wait. Well, I guess what we're getting at is if we're going to allow public comment well, it's the same issue, right? Okay. All right. Then we're good. That town manager items.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. A lot of things going on in our town. I would be amiss if I didn't recognize our town staff for the hard work that they did on the Bayside Park. I kind of stepped out there and gave a deadline and had kind of, being a little cowboy on that, and they came through and they held me up and they supported our commitment to that, and it's much appreciated. And I've expressed that to Jason and Jeff and to pass that along to their staff. But they did an excellent job, and we've got a lot to be proud of here. The next project is the Times Square clock will be installed actually on the 14th. The manufacturer will be in town to do that. Unfortunately for the public, we'll be covering it up with a tarp until the 28th. So don't go look at it. Act like it's not there.
How are you going to secure that?
It's going to be, Frank's going to be there overnight. He's used to staying here overnight. So we're just going to assign him that task for the
I'll let you borrow my dog.
So we have
Yeah, and
so people
Foley
have to know
can
to
go
wear
out.
people have to know to wear a watch for a while because they won't be able to see.
Correct.
The clock.
Foley can go out and keep him company. The other thing is we're going to be working on the new ball field. The larger ball field. We'll start some of that process in the next few days, moving forward with getting that ready as we continue to rehab and upgrade and bring Bay Oaks Park into resemblance of its past and a better future. Also, I continue to evaluate the organization, and there'll be more information coming at our next meeting about some changes, and I'm pretty excited about them, and we'll speak with each of you individually about that in the next week, so you understand exactly what I'm doing and kind of just bring you into that conversation. So it's some things we've talked about, so it'll be a lot of positives. That's it.
Vice Mayor, look, you got something to say.
Just a question for our town manager. it's my, I had asked earlier, and I just wanted to confirm publicly so people can be aware of it. I had asked you to invite our Lee County appraiser to our meeting, and I believe you did that, and I think you've got some good news to report on that. Would you?
Yes, I actually
Want to share
asked Amy to do it, and she's got some good news to report. But yes, he has graciously accepted and will be here on the 25th, I believe, Amy.
So the Lee County appraiser will be here on the 25th of September. Everyone has gotten their trim notices from the Lee County appraiser, and I must say that we have a very sharp Lee County appraiser, but at the same time, a lot of folks have questions, including myself. I've received some correspondence from people who own condos, and even the land how the land is appraised for the condo itself, the buildings. There's a lot of questions regarding this trim notice. There's obviously a lot of revenue implications for the town as we forecast for the future. So I encourage people to come and hear Mr. Caldwell speak on the 25th. If you've got questions, maybe during the public comment period in the beginning, state those questions, and then the appraiser can then make note of that and address those in his comments. I just think it's very timely, given these trim notices and given sort of the bizarro world in which we're living. We're being appraised for properties that many people that either don't exist or people can't live in. And it's a challenging time, and I think a confusing time. So I'm very thankful that he will be here, and I would encourage folks to tune in or attend if they've got questions or concerns.
I think that's very important, and there's a lot of questions. Is there a way that we can structure this as that's a presentation, but those that have questions can ask the questions directly to Mr. Caldwell?
I think we can make an unanimous request to proceed out of order, and I would certainly do that. Parliamentary, I think we could do that.
Absolutely.
Madam Town Attorney?
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing because a lot of people in the condo specifically have very specific questions. And instead of us trying to interpretate their emails, if they send them in, it'd be easier to have them directly ask the question to Mr. Assuming Mr. Caldwell's okay with it, but I don't think that he would mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't, if I was him, I wouldn't mind getting some questions in advance because some may take some research.
Yeah, I certainly send in questions early if you can.
That's why I'm giving folks a heads up. And Madam Clerk, that's the 9 o'clock meeting, not the 5 o'clock meeting, correct? On the 25th of September.
Correct.
Thank you.
But
And if you look at your trim notice, by the way, you have a deadline to dispute your appraisal, and don't miss that deadline on behalf of the town, him appearing here on the 25th. So if you have a dispute or questions, there's a number you can call, make an appointment to either by phone or in person to talk with somebody from the appraiser's office, and make sure you get those concerns addressed as soon as possible.
do you know what that deadline is?
I was going to bring my trim notice with me, but I left it in another briefcase, so I don't. But it's coming up. It's referenced on the trim notice, and they give you the number to call to make an appointment to ask questions or to dispute formally or informally or raise concerns or questions. So I think just to be in touch with the appraiser right now is a good thing, and make sure you look at that trim notice because there's some very strange numbers on there, and I'm not saying they're inappropriate. I'm just saying there's a lot of confusion right now, and understandably so, because it's a volatile time.
Mayor, if I may, one more thing. In addition to the flags, and we really do appreciate all that Diamond Head has done for the town, but if you notice to the mayor's right, he now has his own gavel. He's a little bashful about using it, but he does have it now, so we're official, and it's something that I feel like all mayors should have. So congratulations, sir.
And
Yeah, I can't wait to use it. Hopefully you're not faster than me.
checking the Lee County Property Appraiser website, September 18th is the deadline on the trim notice.
Thank
So
you.
that'd be next Monday.
So that's going to be tough, though, if he's here the 25th and people don't get.
I think it's more. I think your point's well taken, but I think since we don't have a meeting prior to then, I think anyone can call and make an appointment to have those questions, their individual questions addressed, because everybody's situation is pretty unique. I think from on the 25th, he'll probably address broader policy issues in terms of the revenue forecast for the town, how what he foresees as is sort of the trend for the future, trend for what the legislature may or may not do to help us provide additional relief. Again, broader policy questions as to how he's appraising property, where that is either destroyed or can't be lived in. I think it'll be a very interesting time. But if you have a unique question with your specific property, I would strongly encourage people to reach out to the Lee County Appraiser before the 18th. Is that right, John?
Right, and on their website, there is a new informational video from Matt Caldwell about the trim notice.
That's great.
Anything else, Andy? No, sir. Town attorney items.
Okay, the first one relates to issuance of a dune walkover permit for 8150, 8170 Estero. This is something that since I have started as town attorney, I've had a lot of input with regard to this. I have received a notice from the attorney for the property owner, and I was not able to get the property owner's attorney to attend the meeting today. She was apparently out of town last week, and the other attorney did not return my calls. So I don't know whether it's appropriate to talk about it today or not. It was my understanding that the issue of whether the actual permit would be issued for the walkover was voted on, or at least a consensus was taken by the town council at a previous meeting. And I believe it was 3-2, and the previous attorney had opined that it was inappropriate to issue the permit. I disagree as far as the legality of it. The inappropriateness is another issue, that it's a policy issue, which I don't get involved with. But if in fact there is an indemnification of the town with regard to a removal of the walkover, if ultimately at the end of the day the walkover needs to be removed, and if that indemnification is tied to those properties, so that the town would have a lien on those properties if in fact they didn't remove it, if it had to be removed, then from a legal standpoint, I don't see a legal problem with the issuance of the permit. So I wanted to bring this issue up. It's my understanding that there is no one in the audience with regard to representing the property owners today.
Property owners.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay, good. All right. I tried to get your attorneys without success. I think she was out of town, and then there was a gentleman who was going to call me back, but I didn't get a call back. So I just wanted to bring this up and see if y'all wanted to change, what you had done previously, because I have received a lot of correspondence about it.
I have a question regarding, and we talked about this earlier, just for clarification, is
Okay.
there are, you said now 2 lawsuits regarding this issue, and why this is appropriate in an open meeting as opposed to a shade meeting?
There is litigation. If y'all would prefer to do this in a shade meeting, we can only talk about issues having to do with the settlement of the lawsuit or litigation expenditures with regard to the lawsuit. Those are the only items which are allowed to be discussed at a shade meeting.
Now, would the
But the issuance of the permit.
of an indemnification agreement, would that be considered a settlement?
No, because it is my understanding that the litigation was brought by the Audubon Society. So the town, even though the town is a party, the town can't settle that case because the case was brought by the Audubon Society.
And did you
So,
mention there was
no, it
another
would
case?
not be.
Did you mention there's another case regarding this now? Maybe I'm mistaken.
No, not that
Okay.
I'm aware of,
All right.
no.
Done.
So I just have a question, and this is clarification. So we were informed by our previous town attorney that we were not allowed to issue the permit because there was a pending lawsuit by the Audubon. So are you saying that that is not correct? That we,
It is my legal opinion that there is no case law at all, or no statutory law that would prohibit the issuance of the permit.
so the only issue would be if the permit was issued and the Audubon succeeded in winning the lawsuit, then the walkover may have to be taken down, and that's where the,
There would be yet another step in the process, because the only thing that the court has jurisdiction of in this petition for writ of certiorari, which this is that they can say that the town didn't do the process correctly, and the court would overturn your decision and send it back to you. And then you'd have to have a completely new hearing and, in theory, fix whatever it is you did wrong in the past. And then, assuming the Audubon Society didn't like that, they could, file another lawsuit. But the court doesn't have jurisdiction to say that the town was incorrect in your decision. What they can say is the process was not done properly, and send it back to you to make another decision, if that helps at all. But assuming that the court did send it back to you, and then for whatever reason you denied it, then the permit would be essentially you'd end up pulling the permit, and then it would need to come down. So, in that situation, you would want to have some sort of an indemnification. And it's my understanding that that type of indemnification was not a problem. I think that the previous attorney had asked for an indemnification to essentially pay the town's attorney's fees in litigating it, which I see no need for, since I don't separately charge for litigation. I think that would not be appropriate. So it would just be an indemnification on that one issue. And my understanding is that indemnification was okay with them. But I can't speak for them, certainly can't speak for their attorney.
so I'm still trying to understand, because what we were told before. So legally, so we voted to issue the permit 3-2, and legally we have no right not to issue it based on anything that's happening with another lawsuit or anything like that. I
Yes.
mean, legally we should, because we voted on it, we should be issuing that.
Yes. There is no case law, there's no statutory law that would say that if someone has been granted the right to have a permit, and assuming that the applications are correct, and I don't know where they are in the application process, but assuming the applications are correct, there's nothing that says that the town should not issue the permit.
So is this just informational, or are you looking for something specific from us?
I'm asking if you want to take another vote on this. If you don't want to, that's fine. We will address any issues as to, I'll let you know if a lawsuit is filed to force us to issue a permit. And that might happen, that may not happen.
No, I just want to kind of clarify from a couple things that Karen said, because, the difference between you and John's opinion, I mean, if we issue the permit while this is a lawsuit pending, then there's certain risks for the town in that. Because if the lawsuit is against the town, and if we did something improperly, then we could be liable for the expenses. That's where the indemnification agreement came in, right? So, but John was saying essentially the same thing, that the indemnification agreement was to protect us from the risk of issuing a permit that was still under litigation. And the only difference, it sounds like, is your indemnification agreement does not include attorney fees because you don't charge that way, where John's did. Is that fair?
Yes, but in the indemnification agreement, it would have an acknowledgement of the fact that they are building this and expending the money, knowing that it is essentially at-risk money, that they will not come back at the town and say, hey, you shouldn't have issued us a permit, and therefore we spent this money and you need to reimburse us. That would be a part of it.
And then would it also be a part that if for whatever reason the courts ruled that this had to come down, that the owners would be responsible to take that down?
To take it down. And then if the town were forced, because they didn't do it, if the town were forced to take it down, then they would reimburse us, and it would be essentially a lien on those properties.
For the cost of
For the
taking
cost of doing that.
Well, we certainly have lots of liens out there now.
So I guess, Becky, let's just ask the question. Is it your legal opinion that we should issue the permit or not?
It is my legal opinion that there is no law prohibiting you from doing it, and no law indicating that you should not do it.
Are we setting ourselves up for another possible lawsuit if we don't issue it?
If you don't issue it, I don't know whether a lawsuit would be filed or not. There was an indication in a letter that indicating that the attorney for the property owners believed, and I don't know that she was inaccurate in her belief, that the town had an obligation to issue a permit, assuming all the applications and, the drawings and everything were appropriate for the issuance of the permit.
Just a procedural question for the town attorney. Have you reviewed the Audubon's lawsuit?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any procedural updates as to the status of that lawsuit?
The judge has not issued a rule to show cause yet, and petitions for writ of certiorari are a little weird. You or someone files a lawsuit that's a petition for writ of certiorari. The judge at some point will review the complaint and will either find that the complaint is sufficient to require a response, or insufficient, in which case the judge won't ever do anything, which I've never had that situation happen before. But ultimately, typically what a judge does is they issue what's called a rule to show cause, and that is an indication to the defendants in the lawsuit, which is the town and the property owners, that they need to respond to the complaint. It's not a typical complaint like almost everything else in the law where the other side has to respond within 20 days. That doesn't happen in a petition for writ of certiorari. So nothing else has happened in the lawsuit.
Thank you.
So given that, just since you're mentioning an indemnification agreement, there is risk to the town in issuing this permit because of,
I think there are potential risks, yes.
right. Now, did we in fact incur those risks when we granted the special exemption? Because I'm thinking we have a lot of pools that are in the EC zone that people are wanting to repair. Is this risk inherent in doing something and granting them, anybody, the permission to keep or build something within that area?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with that.
Okay.
And let me step back for a second. Anytime you grant or deny any kind of quasi-judicial action, you are at risk of somebody who doesn't like what you did to file a petition for writ of certiorari. So, it's a risky business what you all do, and that's why you have an attorney, and that's one of the reasons why it's good that I don't charge extra for litigation.
Well, I think, in that fact, because I know that a lot of times people will file a fairly weak lawsuit in the idea of exhausting the town or bullying the town. But,
Sure.
if you know the attorney is not charging the town for anything, that kind of weakens that.
It
strategy.
helps a lot. I've found that to be very true.
All right. I'm not exactly sure where to go with this. So are you looking for direction from us, I assume, to either issue the permit or keep it the status quo the way it is for now?
If someone wants to have the permit issued and not maintain the status quo, I suggest that a motion is appropriate. If y'all want to maintain the status quo, I recommend that a motion would not be appropriate.
Now, one kind of question, because one of the things I understand that the Audubon's objection was a lack of sufficient notification for this action. And now I'm just wondering if we just said we don't have attorneys here, if we're better off scheduling something where we can do a proper hearing with the relevant parties in the room.
Well, I didn't try to get in touch with the attorneys for Audubon. I did try to get in touch with the attorneys for the property owners. It's up to y'all. If you want to postpone this to the next meeting, I certainly have no problem with that.
I'm just thinking, as contentious as this is, I think it's important to have everybody be able to weigh in.
I'm going to move that we issue the permit.
Is that a motion?
Yes, that's why I said move.
Oh, I missed that part.
That's
Sorry.
right.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion. I guess I'll discuss. I think I understand what you're trying to say, Madam Attorney. I understand both sides, and but I agree with the permit with what they're saying, but I think to Councilor Veach's point, do you think it would be, I guess I'm leaning to having it on a formal agenda item to be able to discuss, allow people to weigh in on it, even though we've already voted to issue the permit, but we just haven't issued the permit? Or should we, I guess I'm looking for your guidance.
I don't see a downside at all to putting it as a formal agenda item.
And can we get that on the 25th?
Sure.
And that'd be enough time, should give you a chance to at least speak to the attorneys involved? You said you've reached out to them, but you haven't heard from anyone?
Sure, and I can reach out to the attorneys for the Audubon.
Yeah, and I think that, instead of a date certain, maybe let the attorney deal with the other parties and find a date when everybody can be here. If that's the 25th, it's the 25th.
Well, I think we're doing this out of a courtesy. It's not a required action, is what I'm hearing.
No, it's not.
So
It's not at
I
all.
think a date certain, this has been going on a long time, and I think it doesn't sound like it's going to end anytime soon. So I would be in favor of putting it on an agenda item on the 25th.
Is it on agenda?
Well,
Okay,
it's under hers, but it's
motion
not.
and there's been a
There's
motion and a second,
Okay.
and
So we got to go through
if-
that. All right. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion fails 3-2. I will make a motion to add this as an agenda item on the 25th for discussion to allow time for our attorney to reach out to the other attorneys involved, where we can then take up the discussion and have a vote on to issue the permit or not.
I'll second that.
I've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Help me understand what we're going to achieve by doing this. We're just continuing to kick the can down the road and, in essence, avoiding what we're supposed to be doing.
I certainly understand that, but I think it's been going on a long time, and I think out of transparency and allowing people who wouldn't be allowed to have comment on this, it's just a transparency, courtesy thing, in my opinion. It allows our town attorney to have the time she needs to speak to the attorneys that she needs to speak to understand a little bit more direction from her side. But I see your point. I completely understand your point. But I think it's the right thing to do.
And I'll just say that it seems like we've given this ample priority in our post-Ian need list. I don't think it's been, ignored.
I think we'll have a resolution on the 25th should there be enough votes to put it on the agenda.
And I'll also get the indemnification agreement so that y'all can review it. All the attorneys can review it.
I think that's very important as well. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1 with Counselor King voting against. Next item?
Okay, and this is just for discussion. I've gotten a lot of inquiries with regard to owner-builder permits having to do with trusts. In general, I want to talk with you about I would say the vast majority of trusts cannot qualify for owner-builder permits. There is one type of trust where people can actually have their homestead property in a trust, and that is in a revocable living trust. That's how it's normally structured. A lot of jurisdictions allow people who have this specific type of trust, which actually it's your alter ego. It can only be held by an individual or by a married couple, and it's done solely for purposes of estate planning. And honestly, people pay a lot of money to have one of these trusts put together. And I've heard some comments about, well, they should just transfer their property from the trust to themselves individually, and therefore they can get their owner-builder permit. Some jurisdictions don't require that. In some jurisdictions, I actually will look at the trust, and if it is that specific type of trust where it's the true owners of the property are the individuals, but they've just put it in a trust so that it passes to their heirs without having to go through a lot of hassle with probate, that they're allowed to get the owner-builder permit. Now, it would require a change in your ordinance. I'm not recommending this. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. This is something that you could do if you wanted to. And I will tell you that there are no cases on this, and there are no attorney generals on this, attorney general opinions directly on this. But it is done by a lot of jurisdictions.
Oh, go ahead. I just had just to help folks and just set the table a little bit. We've been frustrated because this question, I'm sure, has been asked to everybody here individually numerous times. I know I've gotten numerous vigorous, concerned folks who are frustrated by the town's current position. Our previous town attorney said There's absolutely no give. State law is state law. There's nothing the town can do. So today, and I think I'd sent you this earlier, Becky, so I appreciate you taking a second look at it. You're coming up with a different perspective. So for anybody who's watching this, who, in your legal opinion, who continues to be restricted by this provision, and who now could you, if we made this change, who could now utilize it? Who are the folks that continue to be restricted by the state law? Just so for folks who are watching, they can better understand what we're talking about here, because it's a change in position from our legal counsel than before, and I'm so thankful you've taken a second look at it.
Okay. I would say, and I'm pulling a figure out of the air, but, the vast majority of trusts would not be eligible for this because, a lot of good friends get together and they own property in a trust. That would not qualify.
Because state law prohibits it from qualifying, correct?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. This is what we've been
but
told.
This is this is a very specific type of trust, which is recognized in Florida, that is allowed to have a homestead tax exemption.
Yeah,
And most trusts can't have homestead tax exemptions, but the reason they allow this one particular type of trust to have it is that the trust is actually the alter ego of either one person or a married couple.
So it's kind of like a, sorry.
No, it's okay.
So it's like a pass-through entity where some trusts can be owned by multiple owners. LLCs can provide different legal barriers, but this particular type of trust is just a pass-through entity.
This, yes. And the important thing is that it's an alter ego. And the way you describe it, it's a person who has a possessory right in the person's residence, which is an interest, is an equitable title to real estate, as that term is employed in Section 6, Article 7 of the Florida Constitution. That's a bunch of gobbledygook that just describes what a revocable living trust is.
Becky, does your wording that you have or the changes that you have outlined in the draft that's in the agenda packet, does that correlate with the state statute?
It correlates with this wording is what allows people to have a homestead tax exemption. And it makes this type of a trust the alter ego of a person. And what I mean by an alter ego is it's the same thing. I don't happen to own my homestead in a trust. My husband and I own it directly. But if we decided to put it in a trust, we wouldn't lose our homestead tax exemption. We'd still be able to, in a lot of jurisdictions, be able to pull an owner-builder permit. But in some jurisdictions, you're not allowed to. And as I said, this has not been decided by the courts. There aren't any cases on it, and there's nothing in the Attorney General has not opined on this. The Attorney General has opined having to do with corporations and LLCs, and what they say is you can't get an owner-builder permit if you're an LLC or a corporation because neither the LLC nor the corporation can show up and actually sign for the permit. The revocable living trust, since it is an alter ego of identifiable people, those people can come and sign for it.
Well, I just think that last two sentences really helped lay it out. This counselor would support having this language put forth in an ordinance. Any opportunity we can to remove barriers for folks. We've all heard frustrations. Now, some of the people frustrated may not be cured by this, but many folks might be. So I would be very supportive of bringing forth this language to amend the ordinance.
Okay, and if I could comment on something, it will not help people who have other types of trusts.
Understand.
And
That was going to be my question, Becky.
And there is a possibility, since there is no case law, there are no attorney general's opinions on it. 2 weeks from now, a case might come down saying you can't do this. I wouldn't anticipate that happening. But just so you know.
So my question is, legally, do we have to be this specific, or can we
Oh,
just
I would.
eliminate the word trust?
Oh, no, you can't. No, you cannot do just trust, because most trusts would not qualify.
And that's kind of one point I was going to make, is that there's in this, and I understand this is very legally specific language, but there's no mention of revocable living trust.
Right, and actually there are some older trusts that aren't revocable living trusts that actually qualify under this, and I'm able to tell. It is not a burden on me at all to look at a trust and say, yeah, this is okay.
That's my next question is
yeah.
is are we putting a burden on staff and yourself to somehow verify the trust? So someone who come in is signing for the trust, that you know that they are allowed to sign for the trust for what they're applying for.
It's certainly no burden on me. I wouldn't say that it would be a burden on staff, because all they'd have to do is email it to me.
I would support, as Vice Mayor has stated, I would support the wording that you have on here based on the comments that you've made.
Not only do I support it, but my alter ego does as well.
Which one?
Fat man. I'm Fat Man.
Yeah, and I'm a little, and I understand what you said. It was very clear, but I think that in the future, the wording may be a little confusing for people trying to figure out whether or not they qualify. But I guess if you have a trust, you have an attorney who can look at that language.
And even, Becky, even with this language in here being added back in here, they still have to meet the other requirements as far as being on site and all the other things.
Absolutely.
It doesn't just allow
Yes.
them to get a permit and not have to fulfill all the other owner permit requirements.
Absolutely.
Thank you for taking a second look at this.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
All right. I think you have your direction on that one, Becky?
Okay, so I should bring this back?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, and the third item is a discussion regarding a potential settlement of the Persad code enforcement matters. And I believe that I've heard about these code enforcement matters since I started being your town attorney, and I know that this is uppermost in many of your minds. And I think one primary concern that I have heard is a concern with regard to a possible repeat violation. And I know that there was an attempt many, many months ago to have a settlement that would hopefully take care of that. I have an alternative suggestion as a way to possibly take care of the fear of recurrence of violations, and that is to have a...
Becky, just before you get to
Okay.
it, would it make more sense to hear from
Sure, we
Sarah
can.
to see what she's going to say before we hear what you have to say?
Absolutely, that's fine.
Does anyone have any objections to that?
Do not.
Good morning again, Sarah Spector on behalf of Persad Properties. The only thing I wanted to say today is we did have a chance to review what the town attorney had prepared, and we think it could work if we just incorporate the provisions that I believe that the town council and Mr. Prasad had already agreed to, which was that he would remain in compliance for 1 year. After 1 year, and at the beginning of the 1 year, he would put 50% of the liens only into escrow. At the end of that 1 year, the escrow would be returned, provided that for the entire year he remains in compliance with the settlement agreement. And then with regard to the recidivism provision, that it be related solely to these issues. The way that it's worded right now, I believe, and I haven't had a chance to talk with the town attorney yet, but I believe the way I'm reading it is it's no violations can occur at any time of any provision, and we would hope that it would just be related to the current violations that are outstanding. And that's basically it. The only other outstanding item, I believe, is agreeing on what that 50% is. We haven't seen the town's calculations yet for what the fines are. I'm sorry, what the liens are. And so we haven't been able to agree on a number for that 50%. So I think that's where we are right now. Very happy to work with the town attorney on drafting something. But we do request that you consider these few changes before giving direction to the town attorney in that regard.
First, a little clarification, because the settlement agreement was to settle a pending lawsuit, right? And my understanding is that lawsuit doesn't exist anymore. So there's no lawsuit to settle.
There's no lawsuit filed in court, correct. As a show of good faith, Mr. Prasad did withdraw all litigation. There are still 3 pending rehearings. We were here last month before the special magistrate on 3 rehearings. So that is still those are open matters that we will still come before you on if we don't reach this agreement. So at the time, I think the parties weren't prepared to proceed, so that's why we've continued it. But
so these pending things coming from the magistrate, those are, I guess, evidence of continued noncompliance?
No. There were 3 violations in June of 2022 that were heard by the special magistrate, and fines were imposed at that time. However, we filed a rehearing within the time required immediately afterwards, within the 30 days afterwards, and it just wasn't heard for this entire year, understandably. And since the town attorney position had changed, I think we needed a little regrouping before we heard that rehearing again.
And another question, is your client in compliance today?
Yes, because the violations are receiving or complying with the special exception for the permanent shared parking. He has received the LDO. I think it was on August 28th, received the LDO, and has already been working towards complying with that LDO to get a certificate of compliance. And I believe if you need more specific information on that, he could tell you where he is on that. And then the other issue was beach furniture vendor permits. He was not allowed to continue to rent beach furniture, but he's not doing that right now because there's no building there, and it's just a parking lot at this time. So he is in compliance in that regard.
So who's providing the chairs that are there? There's no chairs?
No.
There were chairs this weekend. Did they bring them themselves? I want to ask staff, is he in compliance with everything that we've been talking about for the last couple of years?
Code is still out there, and there's still things to be addressed.
So that would mean no.
Can you specify on those things?
Furniture located at that property or on those properties?
Yes, there's some old beach chairs on the corner by the tree, but they're not being rented or being used. So we can remove those today if that's the need. There's a storage, there's vendors on the property, there's a parcel vendor on the property that's approved, and there's the food trailers on the property. And those are all permitted.
Yes, sir, go
On that compliance issue, and I'm all for resolving this issue, but I just was, my wife and I were walking past Times Square this weekend, and I thought that the prior council there's a giant tree stump about 12 feet high. I thought that was they'd asked for that to be removed, and that's still there. Is that part of this?
That's part of the LDO that was just approved. So that was approved last week on Tuesday. So we got the contractors coming in. When we tried to start the work, staff told us we can't start any work on there until the LDO is approved. So now that the LDO approved, that's a permit now to start the work.
Okay.
So that stump will be dug out completely.
Thank you.
But the tree, 90% of the tree was removed. That was a big.
It's a big tree, yeah. But the stump is still pretty big.
Stump is still there. It's going to need a big machine to remove it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else have any questions for Sarah? All right, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. Becky, do you have the numbers? They said that we're still working on numbers, or there's been some talk about nobody knows what the numbers are. Do you know what those numbers are?
What was just handed to me, the total as of 10/28.
828.
828.
8/28. Okay. It's $2,675,225. My recommendation at this point is to authorize me to go back and negotiate an actual settlement agreement and bring it back to you.
Didn't we already do that?
We did, but we had a lawsuit to settle.
Well, but I meant, didn't we offer
That-
in the shade meeting? Wasn't there an offer made to settle all of this?
There was. There are some recommended changes to that I have made, which would hopefully ensure compliance past the 1-year period. And I believe that Mr. Prasad and his counsel are amenable to having some sort of assurances past the 1-year period.
I think now that there's no pending lawsuit, I would really, I know there's still stuff coming through the magistrate, but I would like to revisit it with that in mind, that we're not, because, you have a settlement agreement, you're the two parties are coming, there's a lawsuit and you're trying to settle a lawsuit. We're not there now, and I think that the idea, I think just the factors have changed. I personally wouldn't support with what we did as a settlement agreement to settle a lawsuit for now that there is no lawsuit. I just think it's kind of, if someone's been making money off of noncompliance for 6-7 years, it seems to let all that go away just if they keep their nose clean for a year is, I don't know, it just seems like the nose should be clean all the time.
Well, I think maybe the best direction is to have you meet with his attorney, come up with what you've worked on. I don't think you need to tell us, and you can work it out with her, and then when it comes back before us, we can discuss it and make recommendations one way or another.
Okay, that'd be great.
So I just have a question on that, because I know in previous conversations, so we're specifically talking about the fines at Times Square, but there's also properties that are involved in this whole litigation process, or whatever you want
Yes.
to call it, because they're under
They're
one
secondary-
corporation.
Secondary properties, yes.
So at
You know,
one
apply all
time,
that.
we had talked about, can those properties be removed out? Because it really doesn't have anything to do with the fines that were implemented at Times Square. So where are we sitting with that, I guess, is my question.
Those are additional properties that when at some point, hopefully we will never get to the point where we need to do a foreclosure of this. But if we were to get to that, if settlement negotiations fell through, then those properties would be subject to the foreclosure, because that is part of the Florida statutes with regard to code enforcement foreclosures. Basically, they cross-pollinate to everything that that particular entity owns.
But I do think that, as a negotiated settlement, that's certainly something that we could consider putting in. Because
To remove those properties?
yeah,
or
but that,
to-
not just to remove them, because that's part of the teeth that
Right,
the liens
right.
have. And if you take away the teeth, then pretty much you're just saying, why have an ordinance if we're never going to enforce it? But I think as far as is coming up with a settlement agreement, if there's multiple stages or whatever, that releasing that could be something that we could offer in exchange for something from the Prasads. But I wouldn't want to do that without any kind of agreement, just to take away some of the authority that we have without some reciprocation.
Right, but to at least put it in as a negotiating
Yeah.
piece of it.
Yeah, I think just to be able, it's hard to discuss anything until you've had a chance to work with his attorney and see what you can come up with. We may or may not agree with it, but at least we have something to discuss and go from there as opposed to just throwing out ideas.
Sounds great.
Anyone have any objection with her working with Ms. Spector? Okay. And,
That's all I need.
all right, thanks. Anything else, Becky?
No, that's,
Okay.
oh, wait,
Oh,
yes,
I had the one issue.
yes.
Oh,
Wait
so,
a minute. Sorry.
Cliff was, had brought up the temporary use permit for the trailers. It was my understanding that it was never intended to restrict someone that has an RV that they've parked in their driveway when they come down. It was, as he, I think, made in his comments, it was put in place for those that are going to live in it while they're rebuilding their house. I don't remember our ordinance specifically saying you couldn't have your RV in your driveway without having, if you're living in it, you have to have a temporary use permit, but just parking it there doesn't require you to have a permit, does it?
I don't believe that it does require you
Is there
to have that.
Andy, is there someone from staff that maybe,
Don't you come to the microphone?
hold on a second, is there staff
Steve,
member here that
can you address?
And I have one other item that I
Okay.
forgot to
Yeah,
mention.
I just want to get some clarification so that, all right, we'll come back to it. Thanks.
See.
What do you got?
Let me pass this. Okay, I had drafted a license agreement with regard to the logo. And y'all had approved the use of the round Fort Myers Beach logo by the Fort Myers Beach Community Foundation, so that they could use that on flags. And they have, reapproached the town and asked for the rectangular logo to also be included. So I need to get y'all's approval of that and an approval of this, it's a very innocuous license agreement, basically, allowing them to use this for a period of a year.
Do you need an official vote on this, or do you need
Yes, I would request that.
Okay.
I'll move approval of the Town of Fort Myers Beach logo license with the Fort Myers Beach Community Foundation.
Second.
Any other discussion? Is this something that we can have handy should another organization, 501c3, that may want to do this as well?
Sure. It's
Okay.
non-exclusive license, so
Okay.
you can allow
They just have
whomever.
to go through the same process to,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, easy to do it for somebody else.
okay.
And is it just for 501c3s? Do you have
It's up to you. You can allow anybody you appropriately want to allow to use the logo. I mean, in some commercial establishments, for instance, a hotel, maybe, would want to put it on their website, but they need to get your permission.
So all of
And-
those would be dealt with separately, right?
Sure.
Every time one comes.
Yeah,
So this is strictly for the community foundation.
this is.
Okay.
Any other discussion? We got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Carries unanimously.
Okay.
All right. Steve, have you had enough time, or you want us to come back? Okay, maybe it's something that. No, I guess I don't want to speak for my fellow council members, but at least myself, it was not the intention of the temporary use permit to restrict someone that drives their RV down to live in their house, that it sits in the driveway. My understanding is it was specifically for people that were going to be living in, whether it's an RV or a travel trailer, that they would have to have the temporary use permit while they're working through rebuilding their house. Is that? You got to just come up to the. I just want to make it clear so that, I'm sorry, I forgot your last name, Cliff, but. Go ahead, Steve.
Steve Poposky, Community Development Director. So yeah, as I recall, the intent of council at the time, right after Hurricane Ian, was to get people in, however they could make it work with an RV right after the storm, since they didn't have a house in many cases. So that was the intent, was to provide some amount of flexibility for a period of time, which was going to be determined later.
Mm-hmm. So maybe if you could, Becky, take a look at that.
Sure.
Just reread it, because I'll ask my council members. That's not my intent, is someone that's going to come down to live in their house that drives their RV down. It's certainly not what my intention was, to restrict people from having to, or forcing them to go get. But if you're living in it on your site where you're rebuilding your house, that's a different story.
Right. Yeah, the Land Development Code does speak briefly about those that are trying to establish a permanent residence in an RV, which, is not allowed. Right. However, if you're just parking it, to my knowledge, my recollection is not actually directly address that.
Okay.
No, and I agree with your intent, as you remember, because we also put a time limit on it, and then that was extended because Governor DeSantis said 3 years, not, that type of thing. But it was strictly a rebuild option, not a parking option while living in your house.
Right. Well, Becky, if you would, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious to the constituent. Did you actually get a citation from the town?
No.
Might want to come to the microphone if you could. Yeah, just so because other folks may be in your situation. Yeah, just if you could.
My son and I came down just after the hurricane, and on day 9 we got in a canoe and we came over here until we slept overnight, and then the next morning we were hopefully going to be able to come on the beach in a vehicle. So we took the canoe back across 5 miles of the bay. Let me tell you, at 71, that's not any fun.
At 50, I wouldn't want to do it.
But we had problems getting on the beach with the motorhome because the sheriff and the state police were trying to turn us around. So I finally had to go to the PIO for the sheriff's department and complain about this, and they straightened that out. They straightened the sheriff's department out. And then when I got caught by a state trooper, I went to the county commissioner in charge of this area, and he got that straightened out. So we had and we actually had sheriffs go bang on the door and tell my son he had to leave and everything else. This is not, it was not a good time, but we got it down here, and we were here 4 months, and before the issue was passed, and I had taken it back to New Jersey at the end of March, and I just came down with it.
So but you're not living in it.
I'm not living in it. It's parked. We might hook it up to power, if we're going to do something. But I don't like taking cold showers because the
understood.
The heater.
But you have not
doesn't
received
work.
a violation from the town.
No, I've only been
okay.
here. I got here Friday afternoon.
Okay. So we'll make sure that she looks at it and addresses if it's specific, because I think you understand now it was not our intent to issue violations to someone that drives their
Yeah, because if you see somebody with an out-of-state tag, you can charge them $1,000 for driving a illegal vehicle.
Well, I don't think
if that was the case.
Yeah, no, that is not our intention. By
So
any means.
Okay.
So I think pretty clearly, though, you're kind of saying we won't issue any citations until we get this thing settled.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it should have a thing saying, when I first started driving the thing down here, the regulation was that you could park the vehicle if you had space. You could park it on your property and there was no problem.
And
It
I
didn't
don't-
say anything about using it. It says you can't use it, but you can park it there.
I think staff can tell if they're living in it or if they're.
I'm looking at the amendment to the ordinance, which I did after the governor did his deal. And it relates to the placement of temporary housing. So it doesn't have anything to do with parking your vehicle there.
I understand, and I appreciate getting it cleared up, but when I read through the ordinance, it didn't say that you can have a vehicle there if you're not living in it.
Well, I think she just covered that.
Why would it?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
and there are places
well-
where there is a law saying you can't park an RV. It's more of an HOA thing. I don't know if that exists in code, but we do know that.
I looked it up when I first got the RV about 6 years ago, or when my partner in the property would park her RV down there. And it says you can park the RV, but you can't use it as for living. But if you look at the past history where the Red Coconut had all these RVs parked there,
Well, keep in mind,
it
well,
looks like you're not letting a homeowner use their property.
No, but the Red Coconut was the only place on the island that was allowed to be an RV park.
Well, there's another place where you can park an RV on the island that just had concrete pads. You could rent you could buy a concrete pad and pay the homeowners fees and all that kind of stuff, and you could bring your RV down and park there. It wasn't simply the I don't know if it was like called Gulf Acres or something.
Gulf
like
Colony, maybe. Right. The Gulf Colony, right adjacent to the Red Coconut.
Well,
it might have been.
I just want to make sure we're staying on topic. I hope we answered your question.
Okay.
If not, please go meet with Steve behind you, and he can help you at Town Hall. He's there. But I believe the town attorney addressed your issue that what your concern is not.
Yeah, even though it says, for living purposes, it doesn't specifically say that you can continue to park a vehicle that's not used for living purposes on your property. That's the issue. I know that this was addressed in a previous ordinance where you could park it, you could use your property for, what do they call it? Secure parking or stationary parking or something, where it's not used for living purposes. I come down here and I mainly spend my time trying to fix the thing because it's an old one and it breaks all the time.
It's like a boat.
Yeah. There it is. If you look out the back window, you might be able to see it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Have you gotten your hurricane reentry passes? That might have been. That's another issue with state troopers and the county and stuff. You got to come to town hall and get that. They're new. Yeah, that's the problem.
Cliff,
Well,
hey,
we got new ones now. So
Andy, can you talk to him? Yeah, all right. Andy will talk with you about that after. All right. I think anything else, Becky?
No.
We got it covered?
Yes.
Okay. You sure?
Positive.
Have you had a donut?
What?
We're pushing donuts.
All right. That brings us to council member items and reports. Councilor King.
Get a donut. On the 21st, I brought up the view corridors situation. I don't see staff here except for Jason Smiley that could address the issue. It was supposed to have been brought up at this meeting today with some sort of language or something about a conversation.
Anyone?
And I'm hearing the theme from Jeopardy in my mind.
Now, is this something different than what's in the comprehensive plan for view corridors?
The vice mayor wasn't here, but I had brought it up specifically dealing with the Estero Island Beach Club behind us. Their dealing with staff was an interpretation of what a view corridor was. Staff's was ground to sky. I was looking for something along the lines of FAR to give staff guidance on what a view corridor is. And Jason Green said that the next meeting he'd have something drafted or something for a conversation and updated us at this meeting.
So Jason and Sarah have not given me anything for discussion here as far as language is concerned, but I think from staff's perspective, we were hoping actually to get a little bit of guidelines about, from town council's perspective, if we're not going to be looking at sky, what is the minimal amount that's necessary to actually say that there is a view through a lower area that may only be 10 or 11 feet high. The top couple feet of that portion may be taken up with utilities that need to be hung that high to meet the floodplain considerations. When we talked about it last time, there was some discussion, but there wasn't, in my opinion, I don't think we had a whole lot to go off of about how we should view, for instance, large vehicles that may be in there that may obscure that view some of the time, or if we were to just assume that all vehicles would be, cars no more than 5 feet high, 6 feet high at most. So I can go back to Jason, see if he has some language that was drafted up. He and Sarah, unfortunately, were not able to make it today. They will be here tomorrow. So if they have something that they can bring along with them, I can ask them through the attorney to give that to y'all.
Does that work for you for now?
As long as I specifically asked, he said we would discuss it, and I asked him what he envisioned as a discussion and when it would come back. And today was the day, so I'm willing to do it on the 25th. But I think we just need some sort of. I'm willing to give the guidance, but it didn't seem like they were willing to accept it. So I'm not sure where we're going now. If they want to bring something forward, I'm willing to look at it and discuss it on the 25th, if that's what we need to do.
And didn't we have the discussion that because of the hurricane and because of the changes in heights needed now for building and that kind of thing, that it was kind of an either or, like if it didn't fall under the new building restrictions, it would be ground to sky, but because the buildings have to go up, so it could be interpreted as either or.
I think so. I think it's just an issue of, while most of these beachside lots are in fact going to be 15 to 17 feet above, there are going to be some number of lots that maybe sit at the front that sit closer to Estero, or perhaps don't. The CCCL line carves them out for some reason. I think we're just looking for something that we can apply to everybody. Staff's reading of the code is still that an open view shed is an open view shed. We're trying to get an idea about, in circumstances where we can reasonably say that, a vehicle underneath there plus all the utilities underneath the building might only leave 3 to 4 feet of viewable space over a vehicle, but underneath utilities, if that would satisfy the council's interpretation of open view to staff, and I think I can speak for staff in general as we've discussed this, to that doesn't constitute a view. I don't think we see that as meeting the intent of what that code was. And to us, it seems like it would be probably better to address the language of view corridors in general, if you want them, or to give us very specific measurements that we can go back and say, well, if as long as they can provide us 5 feet of view space over a vehicle and underneath utilities, that would satisfy this code language requirement.
Okay. Yeah. I think
But I hear what you're saying, and what I'm hearing here is that you expect to have on the 25th language. Are you looking for ordinance, or would you like just some bullet points for us to bring to you, and then there be a wider discussion?
Yeah, something was supposed to be drafted, and then we were going to
Okay,
have
so
discussion.
actual ordinance language you would like to see, and then staff's interpretation of what would constitute a view corridor in those circumstances where you may only have 5 feet of space there.
That's fine.
Okay,
Thank
excellent.
Would that not have to go through the LPA process then before it comes to us, if it's going to be a change to the actual code?
If what we're talking about is just for a discussion item, it can come here first.
Okay.
Is that your intention, is to have a discussion or have an actual draft ordinance?
Originally, I thought it was going to be something as simple as what the guidance we gave them of what FAR was. I mean, I think we're making this more difficult than what it needs to be. But Jason Green wanted something for codification, and I'm willing to have just a discussion and give some guidance.
Okay. Fair enough.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it for me.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Just briefly, Joe, you still awake back there? He's been so patient. I just thought 60-second, maybe 30-second explanation of what's going to happen at 5 o'clock tonight for those who may still be watching. You want to come up? Just give us a preview of what, I know we've discussed a lot of the meat already, so tonight's, I don't want to say a formality, but go ahead and just give us a brief overview of what's going to happen tonight.
Right. Well, this evening we've got...
You want to introduce yourself and your
yes.
title? Yeah.
Okay, I'm Joe Onzik, Director of Finance. So at 5:01, we have our budget hearing. We'll be starting, and we'll have 3 resolutions. One would be regarding the millage rate, one is regarding the budget itself, and one is regarding the fee schedule. And so we'll be presenting a summary of the budget. Well, actually, we'll be starting with the millage rate. Just a brief presentation on that and what it is and how it compares to the rollback rate. A very brief presentation of the budget itself, and then probably more of the discussion will be centered around the fees, since that is not something that's been really discussed yet. But that's what you can expect.
That's exactly what I needed. Thank you, Joe.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And lastly, I had sort of a wild idea, and I hope if the agenda gets too long for the 25th, just let me know, Mr. Mayor. But I thought, given the fact that the 1 year remembrance is on the 28th, I thought about, I know in my living room on September 28th a year ago, Matt DeVitt from Wink TV, the weather guy, was a big part of our life. And I've already sent out some feelers, but I just wanted to see if my colleagues might find it interesting to have Matt come in, give us a little perspective about what happened on the 28th a year ago from a weather perspective, how they came to the Cat 4 designation versus Cat 5, just his own sort of perspective as to the significance of this storm and comparative everything else he has seen, and you know, just that kind of a general overview to kind of give us instead of just having a normal procedural calendar on the 25th. I know we're having a formal ceremony on the 28th, and appropriately so, but thought it might be fun to have him just provide a little color, if you will, as to what happened on the 28th a year ago. But again, if we have a full calendar and we don't want to do that, I just taking a poll here of my colleagues to see whether you'd like me to reach out to him and see if he'd be willing to come out, give us a little overview.
I'd say I would, but I also have something to add to it's timely, that it's already arranged for the 25th, that may add more time to the agenda.
I think it'll be add more time, but I think it'd be very interesting as a prelim for the 28th.
Mr. Mayor?
You know, I mean, that day is pretty much blocked off for meetings all day for me anyway, so.
The 25th?
We've got a night meeting at the same time, so I'm certainly not opposed to it. I know we
I don't
just
know
added
that
the Matt Caldwell
Yep.
part of his presentation. If he wants to come in, and I'm not opposed to it, I guess, if he wants to do it under a presentation, maybe.
Yeah, and again, I don't even know if he'll be available. I've already sent a couple feelers out, but I've nothing's been confirmed, but I just want to make sure everybody be okay. I just think it would kind of set the tone for the rest of the week as we observe the remembrance. And he's a pretty impressive person. I think I thought it might be interesting, but
Yeah, I've seen a similar presentation by Allison from NBC2. She did a really good job too, and it was all about, predicting the storms and variances they get, because, the predictions were pretty close about where the storm was, but as far as how much storm surge they had, they were considerably off.
But I think it also would be a good reminder. We're still in hurricane season.
Amen to that.
And I just think we got a little bit lax because this last one didn't do us that much harm, but I just think it's a good reminder and make an impression on people because we still have a couple months to go.
Sounds like you can run with it.
All right, very good. I'm no guarantees. We'll just give it a shot. Thank you. That's all I have.
Pressure's on now. Councilor Woodson?
I just have one question for our town manager. Can we get a pool update for Bay Oaks?
Frank, Jeff, they've been working diligently on this. We have some possibilities out there, and we really will be bringing more to you probably in a couple weeks. But we can kind of hit some highlights.
Yeah, Jeff Hauge, Culture, Parks and Rec Director, Town of Fort Myers Beach. We have been having still people come out and give us quotes. We haven't got anything specific, but even as of last week, we had somebody come out to hopefully give us a quote to redo the pool. We're working on it. There's a couple factors that play into it. One is the equipment. The lead time is getting shorter and shorter for equipment now after it's been a year. So now they're saying maybe more like in the 6-month range and not the year range for equipment. We could be even down to 4 months if we get lucky. And then the electrical is going to be another big thing with the transformers and everything that are in there. That's the first step that we do have a company that wants to come in and help us out and do that work. And then we will start redoing the pool. There is some bubbling on the pool deck itself, so we're looking at options of resurfacing that and repebbling, and then getting quotes for hopefully a new slide, and which we've been wanting for a while. And then the restrooms, they do have running water to them. The pool does have running water to it. The same company is going to come in and do the electrical for that. So we do have running bathrooms and hopefully electricity in there. So the ball's moving, not as quick as we'd like, but we're still working on it basically on a daily basis.
So just one more question, because I sit as the liaison on BORCAB, and everybody had hoped that for season coming up starting in January at least that we would have access to the pool. That doesn't look like it's going to be an option. Is there any idea or consideration or something about approaching like the Pink Shell or Diamond Head or something? Because a lot of the people want, they want their water aerobic classes back and those kind of things. Has there been any discussion about approaching some of our partners here?
We have approached a couple of them. We've reached out. I know Aaron, our aquatic supervisor, has. Just as an example, Diamond Head said they wouldn't be able to accommodate us. I don't know if it was an insurance thing or whatever it was. They just basically said they wouldn't be able to accommodate like water aerobics in the morning or aqua strength in the morning. But we did reach out to Pink Shell, and I would have to check and see if they reached out to anybody else. If anybody has any ideas, we're open to that and providing staff and lifeguards for that. We just need a place to do it. For sure. Yeah, we're definitely open to it and have already kind of looked into that. I think it's just limited on the island right now. So we're open if anybody has any suggestions.
Is that something that could be done? I'm not in a condo, but is that something a condo association could do if they had a working pool? Or
that's the big if.
Yeah. Well, I just trying to offer suggestions.
I know.
Yeah, and if
Leonardo Arms has the largest pool on the island for condos, but I don't think they're quite ready yet. But there are some decent sized pools.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need a huge area, just something to get the residents back into the pool and exercising and getting ready.
Let me check, because Island End has 2 pools, but I think one was the smaller one was not as badly damaged and there would be parking there. So I'll check and get back to you.
Yeah, like I said, we're open and we have staff that are lifeguard trained that can be there. Either the condo association or a business, wouldn't have to provide that, and we would do the actual aerobics as well. So we could provide that to even some guests that were here, or in a business. Like if Diamond had guests that wanted to do it, we were willing to say they can jump in and do the aerobics as well.
So I guess if liability was an issue, and I guess this is a question for the town attorney, could we provide any kind of releases for that property? Like people had to sign a release that
sure.
they accepted, or there was no liability to the business or the condo association or anything like that?
Yes.
Yeah, and we have everyone sign a waiver when they sign up in our pool too. Yeah, anywhere.
Right. Okay, I just think it'd be really important, and it could be something that could be advertised through the chamber as well, and so that everyone knows about it. So
Yeah.
You got a pool, don't you?
I have a little sip and dip postage stamp pool. I don't know how anybody would get any exercise in there. It's hard enough for one.
And it might look like the afternoon in the dunk tank.
Right.
Could work.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
There we go. We get a bunch of dunk tanks.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, there you go. That's a workout, I will tell you. Climbing back up.
Counselor Veach?
Yeah, I was in conversations with John Romaine from the Collaboratory, who is facilitating the Resilient Lee meetings, and some time ago I explained to him that as far as asking for the money, the best chance for getting money out of this is with housing, because it's a HUD grant. But I said we didn't have the bandwidth to come up with any kind of visioning. Like, the modern, the developers now, they'll have somebody draw up something so everything kind of look and feel. And I talked to them. He put me in touch with a group from the University of Florida called the Fiber, and you can research them. And they're kind of a cross-disciplinary group. The things that I was asking to do is some kind of vision around the Times Square, Old San Carlos area, maybe coming up with mixed-use templates that we could use to streamline permitting on some of our commercial areas, and housing. And it's not, I understand what you're saying, Cliff, and by all means, reach out to me. We can talk about it. This is not a conventional affordable housing project. They call them mixed income. So a little over half of the units are based on some kind of affordable criteria. The rest can go up to market rate housing, and the income you make from that maintains the property. You can also add retail, and if we added retail into a project like this, then we could dictate what could go in there. So we could essentially subsidize a bank or a pharmacy or something that people need on the island. So the guy from the University of Florida is free to come down on the 25th and discuss with us what they can do, and if we want to engage in them. It's paid for by a grant from the Collaboratory. So it's a no-fee thing, but it's a way for us to be able to maybe get a start on actually visioning some things that we can do with the some of the holes we have right now on our island as far as planning and development.
So is there a Resilient Lee meeting tomorrow night? I have it on my calendar, but I haven't seen anything more about it.
Is it one of the branch meetings? Because I know that Friday is the next regular meeting, unless they moved it on me.
I don't know. I have it from 6 to 8 p.m., but I haven't seen any advertisement or anything about it, so I didn't know.
I think there's one Friday at 10.
Okay, so take that one off then.
So if that's, if there's consensus to have these guys come in and talk to us, I think it would give us a good start on getting some of these projects going, give some clarity to some of the people who own these properties.
I think if you wanted to meet with them, with the town manager, and discuss what you want to discuss, and
we already
let
did that.
him decide if he feels it's something that
they already came down. We met with the town manager, met with Frank. They talked about what we would do as a next step, but the first thing is getting buy-in from council, whether we want to engage with them, having them present what they do, and see how useful it would be for going forward. Because I feel like, coming onto a year and there's some clarity we just really haven't provided. It's bandwidth that we don't have that they do. So I think it could be a very useful tool to get some clarity for people who are sitting on these small commercial lots moving forward, and Times Square, and some other questions answered.
Well, I guess it was going to be one of my things, but it's kind of along those same lines as we've had some discussions now with the county about moving forward with some of these things. I think having those conversations would make more sense first to see, because we're going to have to work with them to be able to develop Times Square, areas like that they're involved in. Maybe they have someone already that they're working with or they're willing to pay for. Or I think we need to have, personally, I think we need to have more discussions with the county.
And this is something that I would politely disagree on. I think that, this is our island. We should drive it. And I don't know, these guys could come and present it. Maybe they don't have the tools you want. Maybe they can't offer it. But having them come in and talk to us and see what they have, I think it'll get us off of go for some of this. I've also heard there's other grants for other things. We do have to work with the county, certainly, on some areas. But the last talk I had with a couple of commissioners, they didn't want to step on our toes about what they're going to do with Times Square. We should be driving this.
Well, I'm just a little hesitant, and no offense to Councilor King, but after the last presentation we had from an expert, I'm a little hesitant to want to agree to have another one
there's
come
my
in.
bus stop.
So
This is not the same thing, though. I mean, this is from the University of Florida. They have architects and planners and engineers, and they have a team of people that can come up with this visioning. And I think at least to talk to them. Now, if they come and talk to us, and it turns out to be someone with a special interest that really doesn't go where we want it to go, there's nothing to say we have to enter into agreement. But I think just having a conversation with them, I really don't see any reason why we couldn't, because it'd be a huge benefit to us. I don't think the county is dealing with our commercial areas. I don't think the county is dealing with what we could potentially do for housing to get Resilient Lee money, because I don't think the county is particularly enthusiastic for us to come up with a proposal to have to consider for that money.
Well, I'm certainly opening, if you can send us the information that you have with them so we can at least, I'm a little hesitant based on, no offense, Councilor King, but the last presentation we had going into without really knowing much about it was kind of a disaster. And this is my 2 cents. I'm only one person, but I'm willing to listen to what the consensus is from my fellow members on having them here without knowing anything about them ahead of time.
Well, look, just, Andy and Frank were here. We talked to them, and so Andy, can you tell us what your impression of this group was?
The brief time we had, because we had a hurricane bearing down on us, so we had about 30 minutes. The guy drove down from Gainesville. The insight to the financial part and what they could do could be beneficial, but again, 30 minutes, there just needed to be more, and I don't know if Frank has.
I agree with that. I mean, the idea is awesome. Any help we can get, we're always looking for. But we also need to legitimize that help and make sure that it does fit our needs. And with Adelia coming at our doorstep that day and trying to get this gentleman figuring out why he came all the way down from Gainesville when that was going to be the point of impact or where she was going, we had some just ceremonious conversation and went from there. But there's always room for more information.
Yeah, and there was some vetting here. I went on their website. We talked to them. I went around with them on what they can do, and they have an impressive collection of skills. This is not for one industry, for one thing. And they came up with some ideas that, like the idea of if you built some kind of mixed income housing, that you could put some kind of retail in there, that we could incentivize things that we want, like a bank or a pharmacy. But this is more of their expertise. And I think that if we tell them not to come, I think that would actually be, they're offering to do this for us. We've got pretty much the grants already there. I think it really is worth to hear them out. And I really just feel that we need to get some of this stuff going, because it's a year now, and we haven't really had a frank discussion about Times Square. We haven't really talked about what we're going to do with these commercial boulevard things. And I really feel for these small property holders who have these small commercial properties and right now don't really know where they can go because there's not a lot of options, to give them those options so they can move ahead without paying a bunch of money for an attorney and a planner and coming in front of us for variances and CPDs. So I think it's a very important thing to do. In my mind, this should be our number one priority.
Well, I'm waiting to hear from my fellow council members. I've kind of given my 2 cents already. Anyone?
I mean, I don't see any harm in it if we could maybe get an outline of what they're going to discuss first or something. I mean, I agree the whole Times Square issue and Lynn Hall Park and Crescent Park and everything and what that's going to be. I do think we have to get moving on it. I don't know that these people are right, but we won't know unless we talk to them.
That's, you know, I agree.
And if we don't have to pay for it, that's even better.
I don't have any problem with that. I'm always happy to listen. It generally, and I would have reserved the weatherman for the. I think these are probably, as the mayor talks about, sort of process here. I think it's probably more ideal for these conversations at an M&P, but I don't know what our calendar looks like on the 25th, and the reason why I put the weather guy in there because as we have the 28th is the 1 year remembrance. So. But yeah, I think I have no problem listening and learning from folks. I think as we go forward, maybe procedurally, just a suggestion might be, these might be M&P type situations. Because I just, and again, I'm guilty here because I just suggested the weather guy, but I'm guessing he could probably present in 5 or 10 minutes. But I think about all the people who sit in the audience waiting for their variance to come up, and they got attorneys sometimes with them, and I just when folks go on in these formats in a regular council meeting, it sometimes delays our constituents. But I don't intellectually I don't disagree with what you're having that conversation. I just maybe as we think about these things, and I think having experts come in and giving their opinions is great. But again, M&P might be a better format for that as we go forward, just procedurally.
Yeah, and you know, I went after talking to these gentlemen. I tried to find the soonest time we can get them here, and there was not enough time to get it on this meeting, and the soonest time was the next meeting. And this is something that I really feel strongly about, not kicking the can down the road. We talk about some of the things we have coming in that benefit very few people that we're putting a lot of time into. This is something that benefits the entire island, and I don't see this as being something like Mr. King. They're not from an industry. They're from the University of Florida. They're cross-disciplinary, and I think it's just important for us to go on
Well,
this.
the other guy was from
The
FGCU.
other guy was an
so
academician. Yeah.
Well, I think it sounds like people are willing to have that discussion, and I'm certainly willing to have it. But I agree with the vice mayor; it should be something that should be had at a M&P meeting. And it sounds to me like the town manager would maybe like a little bit more time ahead of time to talk with them to help focus some of that broadness into what is specific to what is needed here. So if there's a way that you can line that up with the town manager's schedule to, even if it's a Zoom call or something, to kind of drill down on an M&P discussion. And if it has to be the only item on the M&P we discuss, then so be it. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of back and forth, and
Well, this meeting is not, they're not going to present any kind of plans, right? This is a meeting to get here and talk about what they can do and what this would be. And, you know, I would have put it on an M&P, but there's no M&Ps this month. The next M&P is next month.
Is it October 5th, though, right?
Yeah, but I think the idea of, we already talked about this date, I think the idea of kicking this can down the road, just because we're not willing to spend time to listen to the presentation, I understand what you're saying, but I just think that this could be potentially a game changer for us, and I think it's something that it's been a year, and we haven't really touched these important issues to help people recover.
well, I don't think we need to take a vote, but
Well, the M&P is the next week, right? On October 5th?
right.
So
I'm okay with putting it on the M&P. Councilor Woodson?
yeah, I kind of agree that I'm willing to listen, but I think it should be an M&P.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
I concur with that.
Councilor King?
From under the bus, I will go with M&P.
Okay, we'll have to see if they're available, because
Okay.
this is one-sided. Now, if they're not available on the M&P, can we then do it on the 25th? Or you're just adamant that you don't want to spend the time to talk to these people about
That's
planning?
not a fair thing is what we're saying. What we're saying is I think the vice mayor made a very valid point. People spend a lot of money to have attorneys here, and this is a very big discussion that's going to have a lot of back and forth. So it's something that's the whole point of a management and planning session is to to talk and discuss and back and forth ideas and not have to worry that there's 25 people sitting out there waiting to have their comments heard. And again, I think I got the sense, and I don't want to speak for the town attorney, or the town manager, but I got a sense that they didn't feel that they had enough valuable time to talk to them. So maybe you could work with the group to talk with them ahead of time. Maybe if you want to be involved with it again. It sounds like you're very well versed on who they are and what they do. But
Well, I sat in the half an hour and talked to these gentlemen, and they had an impressive number of skills. And it's already arranged where somebody went out of their way to find grant money that could potentially use for this. So people have already put some time and effort into this. And now, of course, as we can't talk because of sunshine laws, it's not like I could go to you and Dan and said, "Here's these guys, I've been talking to them." We just couldn't do it. So, but they have the skills, and it's cross spectrum, and I can go and put them off, but I just think that's not really conducive to what we need to recover.
Well, I don't know that it's putting them off. I mean, this is the first we've heard of it. So
again, sunshine.
But you could work with staff to get it put on the agenda if that's something that was important to you. You could have had it put on the agenda for discussion today. So I don't think it's a fair thing to say that we're pushing it down the road or putting it off when 5 minutes ago was the first time we heard about it.
Well, there wasn't really there wasn't time to get on the agenda for this meeting, because according to the calendar, I think the agenda was already out. And the guy drove all the way down from Gainesville, and he's willing to do it again. So we'll see if they're available on the MFP. If not, then it'll just something that will continue to be delayed, and along with a lot of, I think, our recovery.
Is there anything else?
Nope.
Okay. I do not have anything for the good. Oh, I guess I should give an update. We did, the town manager and Frankie and I did go to the BOCC meeting on Tuesday of last week to make another pitch at trying to get economic revitalization along with Sanibel to the BOCC to get it added into their action plan. It fell on deaf ears, is the best way I can say it. They are willing to work with us moving forward to potentially add it down the road, but at this time, it's going to stay the way it was as it was presented to us in the meeting here when they came in for public comment. So we gave it our best shot, but it appears that that's going forward without the recommendation of this community or Sanibel as the hardest hit areas to add that into the initial CDBGR. But they are willing to work with us going forward to try to hopefully get it added into an amendment. So we'll keep pushing forward as best we can, and hopefully we can get that added. But with that, I have nothing else.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question. Mr. Town Manager, is there a community meeting at Diamond Head, or is that in October? Is there one on September 18th and 19th?
Correct. Correct. There's one on the Tuesday, I believe, of next week. Frank's want to.
I think there's one.
It's kind of
Monday
heading it
night.
up.
Yeah.
So
Monday night and
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a meeting that puts together through FEMA. It discusses where we are, where our plans are in the near future, and where we want to be 5 years from now. And it's a requirement, not really a requirement, I should say. Let me retract that. It's a way to discuss how we are developing in the system with FEMA as we progress down the road. So it's a talking points basically on projects that we've already undertaken, the ones that we want to pursue coming up, and the partners that we're looking for to get there. And it's going to have some information provided by FEMA. There's going to be people on hand, like SBA and through our state department as well, to answer questions for people. And it's just it'd be a nice way for the community to understand where we've come in that time frame.
And that's on September 18th, Monday night from 6 to 7:30, and then also one on Tuesday the 19th from 10 to 11:30. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to, it's something you said, Dan, when you were talking about the community block grant and Resilient Lee, is that it seems like, and this is a lot of sunshine, that you're dealing with a lot of the county on stuff. I'm going to these meetings, and we really don't ever talk about it in the public meetings, and we can't talk about it in private. And I appreciate the message you sent. There were a couple things that said that one was that, economic revitalization was our top priority, and that was something that was never really vetted through council. I think that when that the game you play a lot with this money is that there's so many strings attached that if you get money from one pot, it's got to go to one thing, and you got to find the right pot to use for whatever your project is. Fundamentally, this is a HUD grant. And if we want to get money out of this, it's also important that we ask for things that are meant from that bucket. So if a lot of this is for housing, it's for LMI individuals, then coming up with some kind of project we can put in front of the county that says this fits this grant, then that's our chance to get money. If we're going and asking for things that don't fit the grant very well, then it's kind of like we're going into a vegan restaurant looking for a steak. It just makes it less likely for us to get anything, and it makes it easier for the county to not give us that.
Well, I don't think the town asked for anything outside of what has not been granted before. We weren't asking to set precedent on anything that has not been done before. So I don't know that we said economic revitalization was our number one priority. They dictated to us what the priority would be for low to moderate income. We didn't dictate that to them. And we do not qualify based on the criteria that is put out there. So,
that's not correct.
But
because
our argument was, we may not have the low to moderate income housing to meet the needs of the greater amount of money from this HUD grant, but we certainly employ the people that will receive the amount of money. And we were asking for economic revitalization as a priority for us, one of the priorities, along with infrastructure and everything else, because I think it was the town and in the open charrettes that they had in several municipalities, it was very clear that you have to have a place for people to go to work. If you give them a house to live in that is paid for and they have no way to make money to sustain it, they all kind of tied together. And again, we didn't ask, our expert that we had put together this draft action plan for us is well versed in it, been through it several times. Their firm has been through it several times, gave enough examples as to why what we were asking for was not. And all we were asking for was to keep the door open. That's it. Just keep the door open. Whether it's $1,000, whatever you put, just keep the door open. And it wasn't open. So it's going to be more difficult. Our understanding is that it's going to be more difficult down the road to get that added later than at least just leaving the door open. And that's all we were trying to do. It wasn't about trying to slight the low to moderate income. It wasn't about anything other than we were trying to do what was in the best interest of the town to be able to support the people that come to work.
And the one thing, right now, of course, they say 70% of that grant is limited to the benefit of low to moderate income people. And the one project we have which would qualify would be a housing project, because it would qualify depending on how you administer it. And administering it means that 51% or more of the benefit goes to low to moderate income, which means the rest you could have as high as market rate, annual rentals. So it would qualify, and it's one of the only things that would qualify purely on that LMI. And the further away you get from that, the more difficult it is to create that link, and the less likely it is to get funded, because that pot of money is smaller. And I understand the need. I understand, certainly having more people on. And the other thing is that they said in the last meeting that most of this funding is like a 5 to 8 year out window. Now, I have concerns for these small business people who have lost their businesses, would like to see them be able to get a leg up on this. But I don't know many people are going to sit there and wait 5 to 8 years for some kind of funding to come through. They wouldn't be around for that.
And that's exactly why we were asking for economic revitalization, so that the people didn't have to wait 5 to 8 years. By asking for that, we did not eliminate ourselves in asking for projects going forward through the 70% that has to go to the low to moderate income. We just were simply asking for another avenue to be able to allow the people that you just spoke of that can't wait 5 to 8 years to get some of that funding. And we were told at this time they're not going to do it. So we'll continue to work on it to provide an avenue for those people that need the help now. But as of right now, we don't have that. We don't have that avenue. So we'll continue to work, and hopefully as you said, in the next 5 to 8 years, there'll be plenty of amendments, and we'll keep pushing to try to help those that can't wait the 5 to 8 years to open their business back up.
Yeah, and see, like you and I are getting different I think it's a good thing. It's a good discussion, Mayor. I think that it's important that, because we're both working the same pot of money from different angles, which is a good thing for the town. But I also think that, like the last Resilient Lee meeting, that's something they said. They said this, really, they're talking 5 to 8 years before that money was utilized, which to me just means, and I understand too, basically a lot of the stuff, the hazard mitigation grant money, this kind of money, it's really meant to build stronger for the next storm, not help people recover from the last storm. And there is money that's more available for that, although I don't know if it really fits into this pot.
Well, I'm certain we're going to have this discussion several times over the next couple of years, so we aren't going to solve it today, but.
But I do think it's a good idea to have this conversation periodically, though, Mayor, in the public forum, which is where we can talk about it.
Absolutely. Another M&P issue. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Move to adjourn.
Well, I have one more thing. I'm so
close.
sorry. I forgot. You were so close, John. So close. Okay, so pink zones. Let's go FMB. We had a discussion, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 meetings ago, that there was already something in our code that could provide some kind of overlays, and you were going to flesh
Yes.
that out. But
Yes.
just asking for where we are with it.
I'm still working on it.
Okay. Okay.
And
Do you have any kind of timeline?
How about if I get something, I don't know what the 25th looks like.
Busy?
Why not add one more? We're in meetings all day.
I can get some ideas to you by then.
It makes sense because that part, pink zones by themselves really don't do much because everything is still, there's, you still have certain code things you have to jump through.
Right.
And part of the reason why I really wanted this group to come is the idea that you come up with a template that allows people to streamline the process because the templates have already been pre-approved. So they're mixed-use designs that if someone's down there where, south of the Catholic Church, they've got a small lot, it allows them to look at it and say, well, I can do this without going through and getting variances because this has been pre-approved. That's the pink part of that. That's the reduced red tape is because you've already pre-vetted parts of that.
Right, but you go ahead and talk. You can say it better than I can, probably.
Don't know about that, but anyway, yes, what they have are the development agreement with deviations, which you can have a format, and I've got a format for a development agreement, and you can under what is in your code, you can have a development agreement, which is 5 to 20 page document, depending upon, how many deviations they need, what sort of things they want. And you lay out what they're going to do with the property. And if they need certain, what would otherwise be variances or what would otherwise be special exceptions, they lay them out exactly what needs to be done. And it can come in all at once, and y'all can approve it, and it's done. So it's the only other time I've ever had a code provision like this was in Naples. They had site plans with deviations, which was very similar. They actually got rid of it because a new council came in and they were a little less enamored with development. But the idea of being able to lay out all the deviations without going through all the hoops of variances and special exceptions and that sort of thing, it really makes it a lot easier.
So, how does that vary from a CPD? It's not as specific as a CPD?
It does not require a rezoning. It is similar, but it's quicker, and it doesn't require a rezoning, and it wouldn't require, depending upon what the comp plan shows as the future land use, it wouldn't require, an amendment, a small scale change in the future land use. So it's a little user-friendly, more user-friendly. I mean, it's not fall off a log easy, but neither is, from what I've been able to tell, the pink zone. Because it's a little hard to crawl into the mind of a developer and come up with a template that a developer is really going to want to use.
Well, in my understanding too, and when we first talked about this, is that this piece is in our current code.
It's already there.
And it just needs to be, structured
Yes.
versus coming in with yet something different in a pink zone due to the hurricane. So this is already there, and
This
it's
is already
easier
there.
to implement.
Yes.
So I, for one, would like to hear more about it.
Okay, and I'll bring something back on the 25th.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
I'll second John's motion for adjournment.
Should we back up the bus on that?
We got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously, and because I don't want to hurt the town manager's feeling, we are adjourned at 12:52.